There's shenanigans afoot.
All right, good evening. Now I'd like to bring the regular evening meeting of the Township of Langley Council to order. And the first item is to adopt and receive the agenda items. Could I have a motion, please? Oh, and one, just prior to that, there's one change. The delegation D1 has withdrawn. So with that change, I'd ask for a motion. Councillor Fox, second by Councillor Davis. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is adoption of minutes, and we have two: regular evening council meeting of November 6th and the public hearing meeting of November 6th. Could I have a motion to receive both? Councillor Fox, second by Councillor Arneson. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. There are no presentations. The delegation has withdrawn. We move on to reports to council. Bylaws for first and second reading. And F1 is Brookswood Furnished Community Plan Amendment, Cedar Creek Estates Manufactured Home, Bylaw 5320 and 5327. So, Councillor Long, second by Councillor Qualley. Oh, sorry. Any discussion on first and second? Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just had a question as to why this bylaw will exempt the Cedar Creek Estates from the application of the tree bylaw, I guess it is. Is it because there's no real trees there? Is that why that's come through?
Mr. Seffi?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's partly it. And the other reason is because of the fact that the other mobile home park designated areas in the plan are similarly exempt from the tree bylaw. So this is to make sure that there's consistency.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question on F1. And that carries unanimously. Whoops. Oh, this lost my spot. Okay, so now we move on to, completely lost my place with my new electronic device. We'll go to the old paper one. To bylaws of first, second, third reading. And that's G1 is highway closure, dedication, removal, and disposal. Bylaw 5183. Councillor Fox moves. Second by Councillor Davis. Any discussion on G1? See none, I'll call the question. Carries unanimously. And we move on to bylaws for consideration at third reading. And H1 is rezoning application 100441, Hub Engineering. Bylaw is 5308 and 5309. Motion, please. Councillor Whitmarsh, seconder. Councillor Davis. Oh, okay, Councillor Davis seconds. Okay, Councillor Long. Whoops, Councillor Long. Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Yeah. So we heard a lot about getting in and out of this proposal. So I'd like to make an amendment that access be provided to 36th Avenue. And I don't want to say where or how, but just that it needs to be there, and that way staff can determine where the best location would be for access to 36th Avenue.
Seconded by Councillor Davis. So I'll turn on the amendment. Anybody wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Fox.
Well, I'm not sure how we're going to get access to 36th Avenue, but I have a serious concern about going to 36th Avenue, and I'd like to know if potentially through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Seffi, if there were some other options. The reason that I'm concerned about 36 going through the 36th Avenue, if you look at the street there, I'm not sure if there's a designated name on it, but if you took that through to 36th Avenue, it would be a rat running course out of there. We would be having all these houses coming and insisting that this was compromising their lifestyle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think going to 36th Avenue would be the wrong way to go. I'm not sure if there's other options, and I'm not sure if staff has explored other options in response to this. Maybe if we could ask that question before I respond or make a decision on this option.
Mr. Seffi, if you could respond to Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, staff has reviewed options, Your Worship, in anticipation of the referral or the discussion that might occur at Council following the public hearing. As was discussed or referenced by Councillor Fox, the potential to connect to 36th Avenue is there. However, it's fairly challenging in a number of ways. One is the fact that 36th Avenue is an arterial road, and ideally we would like to minimize the number of connections to arterial roads, providing for them to act and function in a way that they're intended, which is to carry traffic. The second issue is the misalignment, if you will, of any road from the south to another road to the north. So as you can see there, within that block, there's 200 Street and I guess what is 202 Street further to the east. So punching a road through from the proposed subdivision, the P loop, if you will, to the north is going to create a misaligned intersection, which is very challenging and difficult and unsafe. And the other, I guess, the third and equally important consideration is the fact that we would like to have greenway corridors along arterial roads, and having a road or a driveway connection would interrupt the flow and would make the greenway discontinuous or not continuous. So for those reasons, staff considered another option, and that was to provide an access from the south. As council may be aware, there is an existing long dead-end road, 202 Street, which connects to 34 Avenue, primarily for the purpose of providing access to some of the parcels to the south of 34 Avenue. And with 35 Avenue providing access only to the school, and that also being a fairly long dead-end road, the possibility exists for a connection between the two streets, the two roads, 202 Street and 35 Avenue, as shown on this plan.
So, okay, thank you. So I'm looking at R105 on this diagram here. Who owns that property that R105 Street is on?
That's Township of Langley, the Noel Booth Park.
Okay, so it's part of Noel Booth Park. So that northern alignment where it hits 35 Ave, it's right where the Ave is there, that aligns then with the street that comes out of this subdivision. Is that correct?
That's correct. As you can see.
Okay, perfect. All right. So there you have an integrated scenario. So the only other question I have is, because this is the first time I've seen it, on the west side of the tennis court, which is on the school grounds there, would it be possible to put an egress out of that parking lot connecting with this interceptor road? So that, I'm just trying, the issue here is the disbursement of traffic from 8:30 to 9:15 and from 2:45 to 3:30. Those are the times that there's traffic of any consequence here. But if on the west side of that tennis court, or even the east side for that matter, but I think the west side is more practical, could you make an access route out to that interceptor as well? I don't know where the school district property is there.
Your Worship, it is possible. I'd just like to, I guess, caution council and advise that this is really just a conceptual connection that we've shown here, just to demonstrate that it is possible, and it is intentionally aligned to line up with the proposed road to the north. In terms of its detailed design, we'll have to go through a process, and in consultation with the school district, and this is actually the property line here, where the cursor is.
All right.
In consultation with the school district, determine if there's opportunities to provide another access directly to the school, or whether the connection to 35 Avenue will suffice in terms of providing an alternate access.
Okay, so this prevents us from going to 36, the arterial road. This prevents us from having an access right out onto 200 Street, which I heard some people say this provides a secondary outlet, and it meets any of the requirements related to fire codes, fire regulations, and everything like that. So I like this better. It's probably more expensive. Well, it will be more expensive, but I think it's more functional and may respond to some other issues long term in terms of accessing some of the other aspects of the Brookswood OCP. So, thank you.
Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to staff for looking at this as a potential option. Certainly one of the concerns I had with this subdivision proposal was the access point and the conflict with the school and the traffic. And so Knowing this area fairly well, I really like this idea that's proposed here by staff to come up 202 Street. The road currently does go up to 34th Avenue. It is a more narrow road. There would obviously need to be some work that's done on that road. But then to extend it along the way and provide that secondary access, I think, is a very good way to connect and gives 2 access points into the school, which then helps to solve some of the issues that were presented at the public hearing. I think it would also take some traffic going in and out of the school off of 200th Street at the 35th and 200th intersection as well, and so really could be a win-win. Granted, probably more expensive, so you know, as we move forward on this particular motion of moving on to 36th Avenue, I wouldn't support that. I think it would cause all kinds of issues on 36th. But if this motion doesn't pass, I would certainly bring forward the motion to have a condition about adding it from 202 from the south.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, I wish I hadn't said anything about 36. I probably should have just said there needs to be more access to the subdivision, and I guess staff are going to come back with what would work, but who is going to pay for this, and when would it happen? So I guess we're in a bit of a quandary. We're going to need some help, Your Worship. Then if we're trying to give third reading to this subdivision, do we give it third reading based upon this what we're looking at in front of us? And if that's the case, who's going to pay for it? And I wouldn't mind seeing what else is down here on 202nd. We're probably going to have a huge hue and cry from the folks that live on 202 because it's a dead end now. And I'm wondering, you know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but seems to me this intersection at 35 Avenue that will now be created as a four-way could be a bit of a gong show too at school time. But I wonder if I could just modify my motion then to say that staff needs to come back with addressing this issue and solutions to it. Because I have a feeling that most of council agree that there needs to be more access in and out, and we can't leave it with the school there.
Well, this motion is on the table, so we could, there's a speaker's list to it. We could vote on it and just, you know, and then if it fails, and certainly you're more than, you know, able to put another amendment in. So we need to deal with this one because it's on the floor.
Can we find out what the motion is now? Maybe it can be amended pretty easily. I'm not even sure what they're
you could make an amendment to the amendment. Yeah. Ms. Bauer?
The amendment was to add access from 36th Avenue.
Okay. So if you wish to make an amendment to the amendment, you...
Well, I'll let other councillors talk to it, but I guess it could be amended or whatever you want to do.
Councillor Richter? Oh, sorry. I'll go right back. Mr. Seffi, I believe this would be future development, would be partially responsible.
Well, it's council discretion, Your Worship. It's if it's subject to, I guess, if the third reading is granted, subject to another access, as shown on this slide. If it's not stated, it would be taken that it would be the proponent's responsibility. However, council, as I said, has discretion to advise whether council wishes staff to consider potential cost-sharing arrangements in terms of DCCs and DCC credits and potentially other ways of cost-sharing the cost.
Okay, thank you. There's no further speakers on this amendment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Richter, sorry. Yep.
First of all, when we look at going out on 36th Avenue, is there any problem with right in, right out only on 36th?
Mr. Seffi?
Yes, Your Worship. The problem is making that right in, right out intersection safe typically would require deceleration and acceleration lanes that would require additional widening on either side of the access point.
Okay, but it's not impossible to do. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this plan, but I actually think it should go straight through to 36 in order to have traffic circulating there. Do we know how much of the school traffic goes south as opposed to going north?
No, Your Worship, we don't have that information.
Because this option will serve the traffic going south. It wouldn't necessarily serve the traffic going north. How soon would this be built?
Your Worship, if this was to be approved by Council as a condition of development proceeding, then securities will be obtained prior to Council granting final reading to the application, which means that the developer will have 1 year post-final reading to complete the works.
And I also think that Councillor Long's raised a very valid point with regards to the traffic impacts on 202 Street, which 202 Street residents would have had no idea was happening prior to the public hearing, because this has just all of a sudden appeared as an option now. So I'm thinking we should, if we're going to go with this option, we almost need to have another public hearing in order to allow 202 Street residents to have their say on this as well. Is that possible?
That's always a discretion of council to call for another public hearing. So at this point, this motion hasn't been approved yet, so we're still on the amendment.
So if we go with the suggestion that Mr. Safey has made with give third reading subject to another access, we could say give third reading subject to another access and a further public hearing.
Anything's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So right now there are no more speakers on the amendment. Councillor Long, did you wish to make an amendment to the amendment?
Well, I'll try it. Worship, yeah, I would like to revise my amendment and say that access staff. Can we hear back what we've got now? Maybe somebody else can suggest some wording. You know what I'm trying to say. Take off the reference to 36 and say that there should be access to
additional access.
Secondary access. Thank you. Yeah.
Well,
the development.
The wording that Mr. Safey suggests.
So I'll ask Mr.
Third reading subject to another access, and then I would add in and a further public hearing.
Excuse me. Just Councillor Long has the floor. So you were asking for a read back on that. So it's basically access to 36th Avenue. Now you want to add that there, rather than that,
secondary access to the development.
Secondary access to the development, rather than striking the words 36th Avenue, but just putting in secondary.
Yeah, it could come off 200 too, I suppose, but I don't know.
Okay. Okay. So is there a seconder to that?
Well, okay. Oh, good. Gee,
Councillor Fox seconds it. Okay. Open up Amendment 2. Discussion on that. Councillor Sparrow.
So that would then come back to council with an actual rendering of what the subjective for further access actually is. Is that correct?
No. No. It would just be it's a condition of third reading.
It's a condition of third reading.
That's right.
Okay. So I guess I have some concerns with that. I mean, I appreciate what the intent of council is, Councillor Long is doing, but I do have some concerns with not fully then understanding what that further access would be. And then I do agree that, that I would say even with this scenario that a further public hearing would be required, because the neighborhood would have not even known that this was an option. And I think it would be important for us to hear from them to make our decision. So I would say if that is going to be the wording of it, then I would add an amendment or a further amendment to the amendment that a further public hearing be. That staff come.
Well, there's an amendment to the amendment on the floor right now, so we need to deal with that one. And then we could always add a further motion after that, if that is successful, that another public hearing would be. So let's keep that separate.
Okay, we'll keep that.
Let's see what happens with these amendments first. Okay.
So if this passes, then before we actually vote on the motion as amended, the request for a further public
you could have another amendment. That's
could
right.
be added.
So let's deal with this amendment to the amendment
Perfect.
first.
Thank you.
So the amendment to the amendment, Councillor Richter.
I'm not sure that the wording that's on the table now accurately captures third reading subject to another access.
Okay.
And I don't think we should be voting on this one. I think this whole thing should be withdrawn, and we should put in a motion which accurately reflects that unless this other access is provided, or unless another access is provided, they're not getting third reading.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think that this proposal, I think it sounds like we all agree there should be another access point, and making this subject to another access point, I think is good. I just, as you look at the various options, I think even last time at the public hearing, there's not a lot of other options to consider, particularly with the difficulty of 36th Avenue. and knowing where the various properties are, as well as the Brookswood Fernridge Community Plan, and how that will use the lands that are here. This seems to be, really one of the very few options that are there. So, I guess it's fine to have staff come back with different ideas, but I think staff has worked on some different ideas and came back with this as a viable option. More expensive, but certainly viable. So it seems to me that making it subject, this as subject to, the development, the subdivision is subject to having this access point, I think is a good way to go. And I'd be open to having another public hearing to have people to be able to express any concerns that they might have about that.
Any further discussion on the amendment to the amendment? Councillor Richter?
Yes, could we have the exact motion read back that we're voting on?
Certainly. Ms. Bauer. So the amendment to the amendment.
Okay, so the first amendment was that the proponent be required to provide access to 36th Avenue. There was a further amendment to the amendment that the reference to 36th Avenue be removed and that the proponent be required to provide a secondary access as a requirement of third reading.
Okay. So that I'll call the question on the amendment to the amendment. And the vote carries with Councillor Arneson and Mayor Froese opposed. So now we're back to the amendment as amended. And Councillor Richter, you were...
Yes, and that an additional public hearing be held relative to this particular second access.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Arneson seconds it. Open up amendment discussion. Councillor Fox.
I don't think we have to go through a whole public hearing on this. This is application has been revised a number of times. I'm looking at a map here, a Google map of this area. There's, I think about 4 or 5 houses down there. I think staff could potentially just send a letter to these houses and indicate that this is a proposal and get their feedback. I think though they're the ones that will be most inherently concerned about this. So I'm not sure we have to go through a whole public hearing. Then we get into lot configuration, this, that, and the next thing. I think we can get the information of the people on 202nd Street in a very expedient and efficient fashion just by actually communicating directly with them.
Thank you. Councillor Sparrow.
Just to clarify the wording of this, so the public hearing would be in regards to the secondary access that would be staff would be going with, so not necessarily, I mean, if they maybe had a different option that they came up with, it would be that as well, or I'm just clarifying with Councillor Richter the intent of what the public hearing is. It's would be on the secondary access that would be proposed.
Yeah, actually, maybe I can ask staff, if we have a public hearing, that opens up the entire third reading, doesn't it? So you can't just specify the public hearing to one item.
But the information that the public would be presented with would be this new secondary access that's being presented.
In addition.
Yeah,
but it does open up the entire bylaw.
So, and on speaking on that, I guess, too, is that speaking to Councillor Fox's options, we wouldn't be able to, as council, we wouldn't be able to hear from the public whether or not, if we were to not have this public hearing, we wouldn't be able to hear from the public whether or not this option was one that they were approving of, right? Staff would be able to directly communicate with them, but council would not be able to be aware of or continue to have any more information from the public if this option that we would be approving would be one that would be acceptable to them.
That's correct. Through the public hearing. Okay,
so I'm going to support providing another opportunity for us as council to hear from the public on whether or not we've hit the mark on the if this is an option for that secondary public access point. So I think it's best for us to actually hear from them again. So I will support it.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I think I think in this process here, I think I probably would agree with Councillor Fox that we can certainly survey those people that live along the road. There is not very many properties there. Most of those properties that are along there are scheduled for at some point development. It is part of the Brookswood Fernridge OCP, that whole area, and so I think surveying those people, I do think we'll still get the information. Staff will collect that information and can bring it forward in a report to council. I don't see why we would not get that information. That would be the opportunity they'd have to speak into it and to speak about this particular issue of a secondary access as we move forward. I still think that we should make the motion more strict, that the secondary access isn't just a secondary access, it's actually a secondary access coming from 202 Street. That seems to be a more appropriate motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? And this amendment to the amendment would be that a public hearing be scheduled, basically. Is that correct, Ms. Bauer? Yeah, thank you. I'm going to call the question. H1. And it carries with Councillor Fox, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley opposed. So now we're back to the amendment as amended. So if you could just refresh our memories on what the amendment is as amended, so we have the whole thing.
Scroll down a bit. There we go. There we go. There be a secondary access. Hold on. Okay, actually, we'll go back to the beginning.
Yeah, it's the main.
The main motion, with the first amendment being that the proponent be required to provide access from 36th Avenue, which was then amended that the reference to 36th Avenue be removed and the proponent be required to provide a secondary access as a requirement of third reading, which then we completed that amendment and opened a new amendment to include a public hearing to be held relative to the secondary access.
Yeah, thank you. So on that amendment as amended, I'm calling the question. Oh, sure. Just if you push your button, I'll cancel the vote. Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, I just had a question and more of clarification. So this is going to go back out for public hearing again, but is the intent that this secondary road access would be built at the same time as this development? Perhaps staff could clarify that.
Seffi?
That is correct, Your Worship, yes.
Okay, so it's got to be concurrent.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Just a question through Your Worship to staff. Is this, at this time, is this a time when we should outline some parameters as to how this will be paid for? Either if this is an expectation of the developer or if there's some cost-sharing measures that could be discussed with staff. I don't know if this is the time to do that or not.
Mr. Seffi?
That would be correct, Your Worship. Currently, this would be the appropriate time to discuss that, and if there's direction to be provided by council, this would be the time to provide that. Thank you.
That can be done through an amendment to the amendment. So we're on the first amendment right now.
Oh, so okay, so we can do that after we vote on this amendment.
No. Oh yeah, you can. Then you can add another amendment.
Okay.
Or to this one. So we could vote on this amendment.
And then add
and
an
then
amendment.
If it's successful, then you could amend the main motion. Ms. Bauer?
I'm sorry. I believe we're on the main motion as amended at this point.
I thought we're on the amendment as...
Your Worship, let's just track this through. So it's because we don't want to get this confused. So we have the amendment that access be provided at 36th Avenue. That was the amendment number one. Then there was the amendment to the amendment, which was that we delete the words 36th Avenue and replace it with a secondary access. So that carried. So we have the amendment, we we have the motion, we have the amendment as amended.
Right.
Okay.
And then there was
And then
another-
we have a secondary amendment.
Yeah.
That we have the additional public hearing relative to access. There was discussion on that, so the second amendment to the amendment carried.
Right.
Then by my calculation, I don't think we voted on the
That's right.
amendment, and then we have to, and when we deal with that, we then vote on the main motion.
That's right.
As
So right
amended.
now, we're on the amendment as amended. So if this amendment carries, Councillor Whitmarsh could still then add another amendment to deal with the funding.
Correct.
That's right. So we're on the, yeah, that's what I believe. We haven't voted on the amendment yet. We voted on all the secondary amendments. We have not voted on the amendment.
Who was opposed to it?
Yeah, we've done that. That was the last vote, I believe.
Vote after that on the amendment.
We'll wait for staff to catch up.
So we're on the motion as amended twice, Your Worship, and then if that carries, then we can vote on the motion as amended.
Yes, we're on the amendment as amended. That's right. Exactly where I thought we were. Okay, so there's speakers here. Councillor Whitmarsh,
I will bring another.
yeah, once we've cleared
Yes.
this up. Councillor Fox, this is on the amendment as amended.
Yes, I have a proposal for funding.
Okay, so we'll
So
Clear
what
this
are
one off?
what am I voting on?
so right now it's the amendment as amended, so we want
What's
to,
the amendment?
well, we've
that I'm
read
voting
it
on?
3 times.
I
So the
voted
amendment-
that I didn't,
the
I
amendment-
wanted public input, but I didn't want a public hearing.
Okay, so the amendment is now that, in a nutshell, is that there'll be secondary access to this subdivision, and that there'll also be a public hearing. That's what's on. Now, you could read the full amendments, Ms. Bauer, if you wish, but that's what's on the table right now.
That's correct, Your Worship. We have the master amendment, if you will. That process amended it twice, but the master amendment is that there be secondary access and a public hearing
That's
relative
right.
to the secondary
That's
access.
what we're voting on at this point. So if this carries, then certainly another amendment could be put on the main motion dealing with the funding. Councillor Richter?
Actually, I think I should keep my question till after we've gone through
Okay.
this.
All right, so just clear that queue. So now we're going to call the question on the amendment as amended, H1. And it carries with Councillor Fox, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese opposed. So now we're back to the main motion as amended. And okay, I've got a speakers list here. Councillor Whitmarsh, where are you? Here you are, Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, so I'd like to make a motion with regards to the funding of the secondary access. I think that because this, the benefits of this are for more than just the subdivision. They provide significant benefit to the school and other future development that will occur in that area. I don't think that the entire cost should be borne by the proponent, and so I would make a motion that a cost-sharing strategy is developed between staff and the proponent as to paying for this secondary access.
Second.
Thank you. Should there be a percentage or just leave it like that, Mr. Seffi? What would help you? I know you were the one. Just leave it like that to negotiate?
However council wishes, Your Worship, we can deal with it.
Okay. So Councillor Whitmarsh, you're happy with that amendment? Just to deal with, have staff deal with?
I think
Okay.
staff
Okay.
could deal with the cost sharing.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Fox has seconded, so I'm opening up the discussion on this amendment. Councillor Long?
Well, it's too late now because it's out there, but I think we should have just left it to staff to negotiate however it's to be done. I mean, now the proponent probably feels they don't have to pay for it. Maybe they should have. If we had provided access on 36th Avenue, they would have had to give up a lot, right? So there's quite a bit of cost involved with that. With this proposal that's in front of us, they don't have to give up a lot. So there's some, I don't know how the money works. But I guess the motion that's on the table is that staff will negotiate
With the proponent on the cost sharing
on a cost
formula.
sharing.
That's right.
And it's not saying what that is, which
That's
I
right.
think is wise. Let's just
Yeah.
leave that to staff and the proponent to work out.
Thank you. Councillor Fox?
Yeah. We're looking at one subdivision, and we're looking at 202 Street, and we're looking like at an interceptor road. The area between 202 and 200 is in a new OCP is largely, if not all, designated as commercial retail. DCC should pay for this. We're going to have to put this in at some point anyway. You just simply can't have 202 going into a commercial retail. To the right of it, on the east side, it's I think it's medium density condos, if I remember correctly. This interceptor is a necessity in the long-term evolution of this particular small piece of the Brookswood area. You need to have this connected up anyway. I think that the formula, I mean, a contribution from the developer, okay, but I think the formula should be heavily weighted towards DCC funds, because those will be collected and they will form the pot for a lot of development upgrades, this included, in the future. Why should this particular one developer front this whole thing and all those businesses in the future along 202 be actually the beneficiaries of it? So my point is, DCC should pay the bulk, if not all, of this road upgrade because the whole area benefits.
Thank you, and I think staff will be working with the proponent on that. Councillor Richter.
I disagree. The only reason we're even contemplating this now is because this proponent jumped to the head of the queue and wants to get their money out of this piece of land. But in doing so, they have created a traffic problem in that area that the public has been quite clear about. And as Councillor Long mentioned earlier, if the access had to go through to 36, there'd be no question who'd be paying for it. So, no, I don't agree that it should be DCC funds, and I don't agree it should be DCC funds primarily because this particular road needs to be built at the same time as this subdivision is built in order to ensure that the traffic problems are not going to continue on into the future. Meanwhile, we've got 4 neighborhood plans that still have to go through a neighborhood planning process, so who knows when all these DCCs will be collected, and what does that mean? That means if we're going to build the road, Township's going to have to upfront the money, hoping we get the DCCs later. So no, the proponent wants this development, the proponent should pay.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley?
Yeah, I mean, further to Councillor Fox's point, I guess that was my question about some cost recovery on this, because I'm not comfortable just saying cost sharing, not understanding what the costs are. I'm not sure how we're going to pay for that if it's not DCC eligible. So without having some information about what it's going to cost and how we're going to fund it, if it's not being funded from DCCs, I can't support it until I understand what the cost actually is. And if it is going to be DCC eligible, then perhaps I'd like to have that conversation about how we can sort of recover that money and what that's going to look like in terms of a timeline. So I can't just support a blanket cost sharing without understanding what that is and how we're going to perhaps recover some of that money.
Thank you. Councillor Davis?
Thank you. As the amendment was read, it's to look at a second entry or exit.
This amendment is on the funding.
Okay, but we're not funding that new proposed road. We're talking about an entrance to this project, and that entrance may come out anywhere else. Am I wrong?
Mr. Backen?
Worship, effectively the motion as it stands now is that it be provided for secondary access and that there be a public hearing scheduled. So now we're talking about the cost sharing for the secondary access. At this point, the secondary access has not been fully resolved.
Yeah.
So it's really a discussion of what the cost sharing should be, wherever the secondary access is.
So I'm sorry, Councillor Fox, I don't know what the road's got to do with it. And I understand what it's got to do with it, but I think that's what I thought you were talking about, the road. We're talking about an access off this project.
Yeah, so this amendment is, as Mr. Backen stated, funding formula for secondary access. This is one.
Wherever
this would be one proposal. I don't believe this is the final proposal. It could be, but it is one proposal.
But that's not a secondary exit. This road has nothing to do with it. Yeah. There's one exit right there an entrance. It's got to have an entrance or an exit somewhere else. It's got to have two of them. So on the other side of 35th, why should we be, or did I?
Mr. Backen?
Worship, I think Councillor Davis is suggesting that a secondary access to the development would not necessarily cross 35th.
Yeah.
But I think in the context of the discussion, the way it's being interpreted, only because we're talking about providing a secondary relief access to the development itself, it could go north or south. But I mean, that is a matter of debate.
But that's making me think, how am I going to vote to this? Well, really, I shouldn't. We're assuming that, that could be an enhancement, but it shouldn't be. The vote should just be on a second entrance or exit.
Right now, we're just on the funding.
So the point is that secondary access or access or exit, but this is really a secondary, what was it called? It was called a secondary road access as opposed to a secondary access to the development.
Okay, I just got through the Mayor to Councillor Fox. I'm just worried that I'm going to start making a vote on this road, and that's maybe not what I should be doing.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Whitmarsh?
Well, I am the one who made the motion, and so there's been some good points suggested here. I think we're waiting to hear, I guess, from staff on the best secondary road access, and I guess that has not been determined, even though there's not a lot of options. Staff has already done some work on this, so maybe this motion is premature in the sense of funding. Maybe it would be helpful then to wait until they come to us with some kind of report of the best secondary road access, and along with that, provide what the funding options might be at that time. Might be better.
Worship, I understand the sentiment. The challenge we have, I think, is one of the access and two of the cost. The problem is, I think, as Mr. Seffi described it, the access off of 36th Avenue is problematic in terms of both the acceleration and deceleration lanes, right in, right out, and perhaps some sort of left hard movement if it would actually fit. That's one issue. The secondary issue is if there is to be another access, a road access, it would be the connection to 202 Street, again, subject to public hearing. That too has certain costs associated with it that could be fairly significant, given that it's approximately 2/8, or at least 1/8 of a mile of road, maybe 2/8 of a mile of road that need to be improved, which would be a quarter mile. Both are significant. So I think the motion as it stands is that there be a secondary access and that there be some sort of cost sharing. Tell staff that there is all sorts of things to look at, but that it won't be borne exclusively by the proponent. And that is the matter of the second full amendment, that we're getting some direction as to whether or not this should be something that's strictly of the proponent or whether there should be some other cost sharing, given the fact that there may be community benefit to this, and that's for council to decide.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Arneson?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Sadly, I'd have to say this conversation for me is a poster child as to why we need neighbourhood plans. I have not seen this prior to coming to council tonight, and this in the abstract to me is not a good way to be moving forward, even if we're putting provisos around it saying we're going to ask the public. To me, I have no sense of when this is going to happen, the degree to which other properties will be impacted, and it does seem to me to be premature, but sadly we've decided to go forward with some applications without the benefit of a neighbourhood plan. So I can't really see that I can make an informed decision upon this just because I don't have an adequate amount of information to let me know what it is that is really relevant to this discussion. So I'm dissatisfied.
Thank you. Councillor Fox?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into an argument with Councillor Richter about jumping the gun and so on and so forth. This proponent had every right to come forward with this proposal based upon your motion of 2004 and servicing. The servicing is right there.
Speak to the amendment.
So,
which is funding.
This particular, although I appreciate Councillor Arneson's comments, this particular access in the long term will actually be a benefit and create a more positive flow associated with it, connecting 35 Avenue with 202. It obviously can't come straight down. So connect it with 202 and it would give access for all those future developments, and DCC should pay for it. I mean, if the proponent is expected to pay some upfront or gets DCC rebates or whatever the case may be, I think staff can deal with that. But, you know, to say, oh, now you got to go back to another public hearing, then you're going to, okay, so we open up the whole configuration issue. We're going to talk about 36th Avenue, which is an absolute no-go in my mind. Absolutely imperative that nothing goes through to 36 because it'll be a rat race from 35 to 36. Every day, parents will be going, scooting through there and creating no end of problems. And the people come back and say, I told you so.
So
we know that. So
on the funding. Yeah.
So, you know, what is the option? This road will be built at some point in the near future as this area develops. We haven't seen any proposals from there. We're waiting for the neighborhood plan. These people, yeah, they were in the queue. They've been in queue for a long time. I don't see the problem. Come back to me with some ideas of, as staff is creative, DCC rebates, using DCC funds, whatever the case may be, working with the proponent to see what can be done and create this flow.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley.
Thanks. So since we've decided already to send this back to public hearing, I think that gives us an opportunity to find out what the cost is and what this is actually going to look like. So I don't know if we need to make a decision on funding today. So perhaps I could propose a deferral on a funding motion. No, a referral.
No, Your Worship, if it's going back to public hearing, we don't have to know the exact cost amount, but we should be telling the public prior to that there will be a cost contribution or there won't be a cost contribution. Staff would go and work with the proponent to determine what would be fair and equitable, and that's what would go to the public hearing if we're going to do the second public hearing.
So we'd have an understanding at the public hearing then of what the costing would look like before we...
We'd have to before there was a third reading provided.
We'd have to refer the entire third reading back to staff to deal with this once it's amended.
The effect of the new public hearing, if this passes, is effectively to revisit third reading. It would be a new third reading.
Right. Okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? If not, I'm going to call the question. It carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Davis opposed. So now we're back to the main motion as amended. And there's a speakers list here still. Councillor Richter, did you wish to speak to the main motion as amended?
Yeah, I just wanted to get a clarification. So the way this is worded now, does it need to be referred back to staff?
Ms.
Or do we simply carry on to another public hearing? And if we carry on to another public hearing, then that means technically this has not received third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Richter. I'll just wait for a ruling by Ms. Bauer. So we're now at third reading as amended. So the next motion could be to refer third reading back to staff to deal with the amendments and to schedule the public hearing. Or do we just, because if we pass this, it is referring it to public hearing anyway. We're kind of passing third reading if we say.
Correct. There was a third reading. That motion has been amended twice, and each amendment, or the first amendment, has had two sub-amendments to it. So now if we actually pass this motion, it's effectively referring it back to third reading. It's not an adoption of the third reading because it has to go back to public hearing.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. No, we just...
I was asking Mr. Backen.
No, I'm interpreting what Mr. Backen said, as he just told me that we don't, this is an effective referral back to staff, and we don't require a referral motion. That was the question that he asked. Mr. Backen, if you can clarify that.
That's effectively correct, Your Worship. What we're saying is, to be very, very clear, is that third reading is not being granted. The effect of the amendment is to refer this back to a further, so because there's a reference to a new public hearing, the effect of that is to refer the whole thing back to a public hearing.
Thank you. Does that clarify it for you, Councillor Richter?
So it's going to another public hearing?
Yes.
So it has not had third yet?
Correct.
Okay.
That's the effect of the amendments. Okay, so with that, I will call the question. That carries with Councillor Fox and Arneson opposed. So we'll move on to H2, and that's rezoning application 100468, development permit 100909, bylaws 5303 and 5304. Could I have a motion, please? On H2. Oh, just getting there? Okay. That is the Township of Langley, 205 Street, 3500 block. Councillor Fox moves it, seconder. Councillor Whitmarsh seconds. Discussion on H2. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question on H2. And it carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson opposed. And we move on to bylaws for final adoption. And I1 is bylaw notice enforcement bylaw amendment, bylaw 5323. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Qualley. And discussion on I1. Seeing none, I'll call the question. And it carries unanimously. Move on to I2. This is Drainage Development Works Agreement Bylaw, Qualico, bylaw 5296. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Fox. And discussion, Councillor Richter.
Yeah, didn't we just deal with this in the afternoon meeting?
Your Worship.
Mr. Backen.
I think we've dealt with the concept of the agreement, but now we have the actual bylaw that needs to be in place to support the agreement.
That's right. That was a report.
One second. Mr. Sevi wants to clarify.
Mr. Sevi?
Thank you, Worship. There are two companion instruments, if you will. One requires a bylaw. The other one requires council's authorization for staff to execute an agreement. The DWA is the subject of the bylaw, which council has already given 3 readings to, and is on the evening agenda for adoption. Companion to that is a DCC front-enders agreement, which is a separate agreement, but a companion tool for us to be able to compensate a developer for the cost of the pond. That is not subject to a bylaw, but rather an agreement that council authorized in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, call the question on I2. It carries unanimously. And move to I3. This is highway closing dedication removal, bylaw 5322. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Sparrow, seconder. Councillor Qualley. And I just want to have a question for staff for Mr. Backen. I understand some material have been distributed to council, and I just want to be clear, after the public hearing, before final adoption, council cannot receive any further information. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay.
If material is distributed in relation to the rezoning, in this case, though, we also have something going on in terms of a road exchange or highway closing and dedication and removal. So while it's a companion topic, it's a separate topic.
Okay, just want to be clear on that. Thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yes, and we received a letter yesterday, or an email yesterday, from one of the properties that backs onto this road closure. And
we just have to be cautious, Your Worship, that we're not talking about a property subject to the rezoning. We're talking about a property that might like to acquire the road interest itself.
Okay, so this is appropriate to
yes, well,
receive.
we advertised that we're going to close this road, and if anybody had any interest, they needed to write us by noon today.
Correct.
So we received
This
a
communication
letter.
about the road
Okay,
closure, not
so
about
what do
rezoning.
we do now? Do we refer it, defer it?
So we can discuss the issue of the communication as to the road closure and the exchange. That's what could be discussed.
Okay, so I will move that motion then.
Motion is what exactly?
So the residents can advise on their interest in the roadway?
Correct.
Okay, so the motion's on the floor. So the, okay, let's get back here. I3 has been moved and seconded, so now we're referring it. What does this motion
Your Worship,
effectively
to
do?
go back to first principles,
Yeah.
forgetting any other
Yeah.
application that may exist in the world,
Okay.
we simply have a situation here where there's a road closing and dedication removal, period.
Right.
As part of the statutory advertising that's gone out, we've received communications from the residents that they may wish to actually arguably have an attempt to acquire this. It's up to council to determine if the transaction as proposed is satisfactory, or if council wishes to entertain other, I guess, offers, if you will, or other interests as to this highway road closure. So that's where it's at right now. The statutory advertising highlights whether or not anyone may wish to actually put that forward, but it's up to council to determine if they've received enough information already, or if they wish to entertain future information.
So the motion that's on the floor
Yes.
would require an amendment, or does it require?
Not an amendment,
No,
it's a
excuse me,
deferral, isn't
I believe it's a referral.
Referral, that's what I was wanting to get to, amendment or referral. Thank
light
you.
of the
'Cause I didn't hear the word referral.
Okay.
Thank you. Or I missed it. So the motion is to refer this back to staff.
To determine if other residents have an interest in acquiring the property.
Okay, thank you. So with that, is there a seconder? That clarification. Councillor Arneson. So open that up to Amendment 1. So speakers list, sorry, I just opened up Amendment 1. Whoever would like to speak to it, Councillor Qualley.
Sorry, I don't understand. Was there a letter sent to all of council, or was there new information? I don't recall seeing something. Was it sent to all of council, or where?
I believe there was an email that may have been sent to each member of Mayor and Council individually. I don't know if we received it.
Yesterday by Beverly.
I didn't see it. No. Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't read it because I was assuming it was relating to the public hearing piece that we weren't allowed to see new information on. So I didn't read it because I was trying to abide by the rules relating to the public hearing. So, so I'm sorry I didn't read that. I assumed it was related to that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fox.
Well, this particular letter states clearly, all we're asking for is lots 3, 4, and 5 to have front setback adjusted to 35 feet. Has nothing to do with potential purchasing of the land. The implicit information in this particular letter is not applicable in this case, in my opinion, because we've done third reading. It states all we're asking for. It is not asking for consideration of purchase. It's not asking for consideration of anything other than front setbacks. This, point of order, Your Worship, this is not appropriate and should not be heard by this council.
Thank you. Mr. Backen, you wish to say something?
Worship, I believe it's based on a subsequent paragraph contained in that letter that references a willingness to explore purchase. So I think if we continue with the dialogue down that, I think it shows up. That's what's under discussion.
Okay, and that's what we're discussing. Yeah. So I'd rule that this referral is in order. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I guess through Your Worship, maybe to Mr. Backen, when I considered this as, what the neighbours were wanting or expressed an interest in, it did raise the issue to me if the township has a very specific policy. I read the community charter at section 26. It talks about disposal of land, but and it had different ways to notify individuals that you were going to be disposing of township property. But I wasn't clear whether or not, for example, we had a general policy of right of first refusal to the neighbors. So if you were an adjoining property, we consider that your interest in the matter should at least not necessarily take precedence, but should be considered in the same way as it would be as per a developer or proponent who is also interested in acquiring the land. So that is a question I think should be answered as a principle of fairness.
Mr. Backen.
Your Worship, I understand the sentiment. It's a bit of a tricky situation because we're dealing with a road closing and opening. In those circumstances, there is no policy of the township per se. Instead, we refer to the Community Charter and the Local Government Act that deals with these issues. And the effective principles are that it's really up to council to determine what's in the best interest of the municipality in terms of the totality of the exercise going on. And in this case, I'm looking for a map, but as I recall, I believe there's to be a portion closed and a portion opened as part of the overall network. If there is no community interest, then there's provisions in the Land Title Act, as I recall, that actually stipulates that any road closure that's to occur should first be provided to the adjoining residents. And that would be the second part of the test that Councillor Arneson is referring to. But because there's a potential overall community interest here, because of the, if you will, the opening and closing, council can make the decision.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, the email that I got, which was sent, when was it sent here? It's dated November 26th. Said that they got the Langley Times, they saw the ad, and then further down it says homeowners affected by this should have had the same opportunities to purchase at least half of the roadway, which I think is fair comment. That's why we advertise these things. So I think it should be referred back to staff to investigate.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I read it the same way. I think it should go back to, looks like due process. I got the email. I think it should go back and give them the opportunity so I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you. Mr. Backen, so the notice on the township page, was it the notice of highway closing and dedication removal, or was it notice of sale?
The first part, Your Worship, if I can refer you to page I3, page 3, it may provide the distinction as there on that page. You can actually see the portion to be open and the portion to be closed. If it was to be an out-and-out disposition, then it would be going to accordance to the Land Title Act.
Right, so this wasn't a disposition. Okay, so we can deal with this referral and we'll go from there. So I'm not going to support the deferral. I'm going to support the original. Councillor Richter.
Yeah, well, I'm just reading page I3, page 2. It says highway closing and dedication removal. Doesn't say anything about opening.
Your Worship, again, it's the map that refers to the totality of it, and again, we're being careful to focus on the actual road and no other ancillary applications.
Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. What are we looking at here? I3. And the amendment passes. Councillor Fox, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley, Councillor Sparrow opposed. So we're back to the main motion. It's a referral, so we're done. It's a referral, not an amendment. I apologize.
Your Worship, just so we're clear on what it's been referred back then, so we can explore whether a portion of the road then can be provided to the neighbors, what their interest is in the acquisition, just so we're clear.
Yeah, that's what the referral is. Sure, Councillor Fox. Yeah, I'm just going to clear this queue, and Councillor Fox, you're on.
Thank you. So for a point of clarification here, we've got Mr. Lintera, for lack of a better name, who's got this bylaw. It's gone through first and second and so on and so forth, who's made an arrangement with the township at a price of $485,000. Now these people have come up. So they offer $485,000. So where does that put us in the spectrum of trying to make an informed decision?
Bracken?
That's the challenge, Your Worship. It's really to will of council in terms of what the overall implications are on the community, the road network, as we've talked about. So as long as it's clearly understood what the direction is, we're certainly happy to go down that path.
So okay, so now we're at two parties at $485,000. So what you're saying is now it's up to council, potentially, to adjudicate.
Potentially.
Potentially. Mm-hmm. Are they able to buy a portion of it, or they have to buy the whole piece?
We'd have to go back to the language of the disposition in terms of whether it would be half or the whole piece. We'd have to look at in terms of what's the township's best interest. At this point, I can't give you an advice in terms of what our recommendation would be. It could be half the road or the entire road. I would think we'd want to get rid of the entire road because that's what the original application did, but it's not a considered decision.
The staff will come back with.
So that will come back in the context of okay.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to I4, rezoning application 100434, Hub Engineering, and this is bylaws 5175, or bylaw 5175. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Whitmarsh. Any discussion on I4? Seeing none, I'll call a question on I4. Carries with Councillor Arneson and Councillor Richter opposed. And move on to the Mayor's report and Council report. All right, good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming out. On Tuesday, November 7th, I had the privilege of visiting the Langley Education Centre for a question and answer with students who are learning English as a second language. They had a lot of great questions about Langley, and also several comments on how much they love this community, and it was great visiting with them. On Saturday, November 11th, was Remembrance Day, where 4 ceremonies took place in the Langleys, in Aldergrove, Fort Langley, Murrayville, and Douglas Park. I am incredibly proud of this community for paying tribute to our veterans and offering our residents several locations to attend. Thank you to all the volunteers and organizers for ensuring these ceremonies continue to honor our fallen and those who served. And special note, the Murrayville Cenotaph was the first time in many years that a service was held there, and really commend the volunteers who got that going again. On that note, I want to mention that Township resident and D-Day veteran, Mr. Joseph Oden, received France's highest award on November the 7th, the National Order of the Legion of Honor. The medal is equal to the Order of Canada. Mr. Oden was in the Canadian Navy and manned a landing craft on D-Day at Juno Beach. The medal was awarded for his participation in the liberation of France in 1944. Joseph lives in a senior's home with his wife in Langley, and I'll be visiting him very soon to present a letter and gift on behalf of the Township of Langley. On Sunday, November 12th, my wife Debbie and I attended the Laugh Out Loud concert at the Chief Seapass Theatre. All proceeds donated go to a worthy cause that helps our local youth. The program is it's a suicide prevention, education, and counseling program, and Options BC is one of the local organizations that provides an essential service to youth in our schools, and it will receive a portion of the donated funds. This event was created by the Langley Fine Arts School student Kevin Statham. On Wednesday, November 15th, I attended the Pacific chapter of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, where our very own airport manager, Guy Miller, was a guest speaker. Guy provided a great overview of the Langley Regional Airport and what an economic driver it is for our municipality and our region. On Friday, November 17th, was the 9th Annual Complete Champions Corporate Reception that was held at the Langley Event Centre and hosted by Trinity Western University's Spartan Foundation. This year, the guest speaker was Hollywood actor and college baseball player Neil McDonough. With over 4,000 students and 500-plus staff and faculty on the campus, Trinity Western University is a $34 million business that has a significant annual economic impact to our community. Their athletic teams have been turning heads across Canada for a number of years now, in no small part to the work and achievements by Councillor Whitmarsh. I added that. Is that okay, Councillor Whitmarsh? Yeah. As having won numerous national championships in different sports over their short history in Canada's top university league, the Canadian Inter-University Sport, now known as U Sports. Did I get most of that right?
Pretty much all of it, except for the credit to me.
Oh, okay.
Other than that, you got it right.
Good. It was a great event. Raised a lot of money. 420,000 or something plus?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome. Awesome amount of money for that, for our university. On Saturday, November 18th, I attended the Langley Centennial Museum's Philip Jackman exhibit, which explores the life of pioneer Phil Jackman, from Royal Engineer to Reeve. It was a wonderful biography, and I thoroughly enjoyed the exhibit and highly recommend it. And this exhibit has been pieced together from exhibits from New Westminster, from around the Lower Mainland, and not only does it highlight the early life of Philip Jackman, but also the Royal Engineers and their role in British Columbia. So it's a very good exhibit. Highly recommend it. I think it's running until February. On Sunday, November 19th, was our annual Douglas Day event, which was attended by 200 Langley pioneers. It was another great luncheon where we honored and remembered those who forged this community and made it what it is today. The theme this year was transportation. Thank you to the Douglas Day Committee for organizing and ensuring this year's success. And this event is a success every year. Following Douglas Day, I attended the grand opening of the Ninja Fitness in Aldergrove. This is a fitness center for adults focused on small group boot camp classes. And they're right next door to the Taekwondo. So one of their theories was the parents are dropping off the kids at Taekwondo, and then the parents can go over and get fit in this fitness center. So
I want to Councillor Davis's tires there by the front door.
Yeah, well, yeah, you got to lift those tires and roll them down, end over end. That's part of the fitness.
Like a good ninja.
Yeah, like a good ninja. Yeah, but what a great group, and it's a business that's expanding in Aldergrove, and it was really a pleasure to be part of it. On Sunday, November 25th, I provided greetings to the Sashing Our Warriors campaign, Launch and Healing Circle. This gathering is part of a larger holistic grassroots campaign to create the education and awareness needed to prevent further violence against Métis women and girls, and to support individuals and communities to heal and rebuild through the power of the Métis ceremony. And what was very impressive was it was a group of youth that had organized this entire event, and it was well attended and had some great speakers there. Later that afternoon was the Candlelight Vigil and Red Sand ceremony at Bedford Landing. This event marks the International Day of Violence Against Women. Through this vigil, we are paying tribute to the women here in our community and throughout the world who are victims or survivors of violence and the victims of human trafficking. It is very important that we continue to shine a light on these issues. This is our community's 13th annual vigil, which is held by the Seroptimist International of the Langleys and Ishtar Transition Housing Society, who do amazing things for women and girls. On Sunday, November the 26th, was the annual Thank You for Caring Christmas Tea fundraiser, where all money is raised to go to the Langley Christmas Bureau, which helps families in Langley and Aldergrove during the Christmas season. Approximately $40,000 was raised yesterday to help ensure everyone in our community enjoys the holidays, especially the children. It was a great event, lots of fun, and we heard from a family which was very, very moving, one of the Karen families, refugees from Burma, who told their story when they arrived in Canada and really didn't understand our culture, but how through the efforts of volunteers and through the efforts of the Christmas Bureau, we're able to enjoy their Christmases, and now that they're independent, contributing members of our community. And this is words from the mother and the two daughters, and it was very, very moving, very interesting. Upcoming events, Thursday, November 30th, the second annual Walnut Grove Christmas Market. Friday, December 1st, it's Christmas in Williams Park opening night. On Saturday, December 2nd, is the City of Langley's Magic of Christmas Parade. On December 4th and to 6th is the Aboriginal Business Match. And Friday, December 8th is Long Table Langley Diversity. And December 9th on Saturday is Aldergrove Christmas Light Up Parade. Also on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday is tomorrow. Oh, Councillor Long is going to take that one. So I'm going to put this over to Councillor Long, and he can talk about tomorrow.
Tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. So you don't make breakfast and you don't make lunch. Because on your way to work or wherever you're going in the morning, you can go to two morning get up and give drive-through pancake breakfasts. I'll be flipping flapjacks at the Aldergrove Legion, and then there's another event at Rich Coleman's office in Willoughby. At 7 a.m. in the morning, between 7 and 9 or so, or maybe even a little bit later, you can get pancakes. And all the donations, of course, will go to a multitude of charities. And then at lunchtime, there's two grill and give drive-through hot dog locations, downtown City of Langley, and then Walnut Grove in North Langley's also having one by the Save-On in Walnut Grove. So there'll be volunteer-led teams at each of these. So it's really a time to give before the big season of giving happens at Christmas. This is a great way to kick it off, and it's going to lots of very, very worthwhile charities and organizations will be benefiting from it. So
you're flipping pancakes at the Legion?
At Legion, 7 a.m., yeah.
And I'm flipping pancakes at the Langley Event Center. So if you go to the Legion and they're not quite up to par, you can come and have one of mine.
Yeah, mine will be fine.
And
we're going to roll them up and put toothpicks in them so you get the piggies in the blanket, too.
Excellent. And also, invitation to council members to come out and help out, or just pop in and support and have breakfast or go for a hot dog. So a great event, and it's really coming a long ways.
And it's North American wide. I heard this morning they were
Giving
broadcasting
Tuesday
from New York saying that it's going to be happening there too. So
kind of falls from Black Friday. Everybody's spending money on Black Friday. Now it's Giving Tuesday.
Giving Tuesday, you got it. Thank you.
Councillor Qualley.
Thank you. I know you touched on it, but excuse me, I really wanted to congratulate the organizers of the new Remembrance Day, excuse me, the new ceremony that happened in Murrayville. I had the pleasure of laying the wreath on behalf of Mayor and Council at that event, and it was so well done. The cemetery looked amazing, and the turnout was phenomenal. So I just really did want to congratulate the people who worked really hard to put that together this year. It was a really great success, and I'll look forward to participating in that as well. And it's not necessarily council related, but council did receive an invitation to attend earlier today at Milner Greenhouses. Right now, there's a huge event going on called Glow Christmas. And I can't believe how many people it's bringing into the community. It's been a really great attraction for Langley. It's hosted by the people who own the greenhouses. And I think they've put in something like 500,000 Christmas lights in two of their big, huge commercial greenhouses. So it's really becoming a great tourist attraction for our community and bringing a lot of people into town. And hopefully they're leaving some money behind while they're here. And there's a charity component with Glow as well. So I think it's really making a great contribution to the community. So if you have a chance, I know council was invited to attend an event tomorrow, so I'd encourage you, or Wednesday rather, sorry. So if you haven't been, make a point of going. It's really well done, and hopefully they'll have some success, and it will be a flagship event for the community going forward. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Okay, so that completes that. Anything from any other member of council or from Metro Reports to add? Okay, so we'll move on. And we're moving on to L, items from prior meetings, and I'll put Councillor Richter on. He has a motion to reconsider. Councillor Richter.
Yes, just bring back for reconsideration the pre-approving of $500,000 for neighborhood plans to run concurrently for Booth, Fernrich, and Rynn neighborhoods.
Okay, is there a seconder to the reconsideration motion? Councillor Arneson. So discussion on the reconsideration motion. Councillor Arneson. Just on reconsideration. Councillor Richter, if she wishes to, she's the mover. She can speak to it. I'll put Councillor Richter on it.
Yeah, well, I brought this back for reconsideration because I think phasing is a big issue still down in Brookswood, and I think running 3 of these neighborhood plans concurrently is going to be a mistake. I think we're going to end up with patchwork type development very similar to what Willoughby's been living through now for at least a decade, if not longer. And I don't really want to see that happen in Brookswood, and I don't think the residents in Brookswood want to see that happen either. So I think we need orderly, controlled development. That was a message that came out at the public hearing from many people, and I am in support of that orderly development.
You, Councillor Sparrow.
Yeah, I'm not going to support the reconsideration. I don't think this is the appropriate way to go about addressing those concerns. I look forward to Councillor Richter's support of my motion later on in the evening that addresses phasing specifically, but reconsidering the motion that was passed by Council, I don't think is the way to go about it, so I'm not going to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
I won't support this motion as well. I think that I've heard from a number of councillors the need for neighborhood plans, and this is what we're doing. We're creating neighborhood plans. So I think this fulfills the goals of most of those on council that would like to see neighborhood plans as part of the development. And so let's get going and develop those neighborhood plans. Just because we're doing 3 doesn't mean it's going to be haphazard or crazy kind of development. It just, all we're doing is putting 3 plans together, and so those plans can coordinate with each other and they can work together. So I think this should be the will of council, that we move ahead in an organized fashion, which is what this is suggesting, and I won't support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, Your Worship. I agree that reconsideration is maybe not the most great tactic, I guess. I don't know, tactic's not the right word. But if you're looking at what we should be doing, I think that I personally feel that it would be wrong to put these different neighborhood plans forward, most particularly because it states specifically that the new development applications should be concurrent with neighborhood plans. My understanding of the new OCP is that many ecological studies were going to have to take place before each neighborhood plan was completed as per the OCP. And so I asked myself, if these are all being undertaken while concurrently we're allowing more applications to go through, I don't understand how that process could work. And I think it very much undermines the idea, as Councillor Richter has mentioned, that we want to have orderly development, and that phasing has been something that has been strongly stressed by the community. So I think that it would be advisable for us to reconsider this at this time prior to going forward. And I just am very much in support of phasing.
On the motion to reconsider, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Okay, that is L1. And the reconsideration motion fails with Councillor Fox, Councillor Whitmarsh, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Davis, Councillor Long opposed. Okay, so now we move on to other business. And I'll just want to clear the queue, get set up here. Councillor Fox, I'll put you on. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Motion.
Last meeting I put forward a motion whereas the township has a respectful workplace policy that was last reviewed in November of 2014, and whereas I've had many TOL citizens question me about the recent social media interaction regarding the catering of the 2017 farm tour, be it resolved that council request a legal opinion as to whether the respectful workplace policy has been violated as it pertains to, and I quote, this policy applies to Township of Langley elected officials, employees, And if so, what alternative forms of recourse are available to those who violated the policy? I so move.
Seconder, Councillor Qualley seconds. Discussion on N1?
If I could...
Sure. You moved it. You move first.
As the mover. So we've had this respectful workplace policy in place since August 18th, 1998. It's been revised 7 times, the latest being November 2014. And it's pretty clear that this policy applies to the Township of Langley elected officials, employees, contractors, volunteers, and so on and so forth. And it outlines what's prohibited conduct and so on and so forth. So I feel that we need to review this in the context of some of the most recent happenings, because I don't feel that they were A, productive, or B, functional. So I've got some things here I wanted to say. I got to say, first off, the genesis of my motion comes from citizens of the Township of Langley. We received a letter here from a lady named Rhonda. Never met Rhonda in my life. Don't know who she is. But I think her letter, which was contained in our package of October the 12th, is pretty succinct. And it's pretty evidential in its context. If you haven't read it, I would really encourage you to read it. I know my colleagues all received it in this package. So
just be aware it's on purple paper. So yeah,
it's on purple paper. That's fine. Do you want me to read it out loud? So okay, so I'll read it. Your councillor Kim Richter has crossed the line on Facebook. Now I got to preface this by saying that this came from the Willoughby residents' Facebook site. Rhonda is, I don't know, administrator, so somebody shared this on that website. A Langley resident posted the Langley Times article in regards to Kim Richter's concern she had with the conflict of interest involving another councillor who is also the owner of Well Seasoned, and then asked for thoughts. This is on the Yorks and Willoughby page. As people, including myself, voiced our thoughts, Kim Richter decided to join in. She has now deleted all her comments as well as her personal page. She went so far as to call people cheerleaders for the other councillor, etc., etc. Not one person was cheerleading. We were stating that the issue seemed to be becoming from a personal conflict she has with the other councillor. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does the township not have a social media policy? No, we don't. I believe, as many others do, that Richter crossed the line. She did not like the decision of the township, nor the results of the investigation, to which I'm sure is taxpayers, not she, paying for it. As councillor like this is not for the people, but for themselves. Her action should be embarrassing for the township, as she clearly states she does not agree with and will not let a decision go that was not in her favor. One of the participants in the discussion claims harassment as his job since posting an opinion that was solicited from a Langley resident. Time for action. I'd like to be contacted on this matter as soon as possible. So that's the genesis. Subsequent to that, I've had a lot of conversations with people. And one of the questions that was asked to me by a person while I was out shopping is, well, what's it like on council these days? Well, I'll tell you what it's like. It's a very disingenuous situation, and I would have to suggest that the tenor is toxic. I lived through this from 2008 to 2011, and I'm sorry, I'm not doing it again. And this is not the first time. There's 3 streams to my concern. First off, the Facebook comments. First public, then changed to private when the heat was on and there were too many negative comments made by individuals who were then classified as cheerleaders. This crossed the line, in my opinion, as far as an appropriate way to deal with an issue that was a township issue that should have been dealt with at this table and dealt with in a manner that was professional. And it mentions that in our harassment-free policy. Second, staff. I would like an opinion on whether the email chain between staff and Councillor Ricker crossed the line in terms of their harassment-free workplace. The third, and Rhonda refers to it, a TOL employee who made comments regarding the Facebook post and the comments and accusations that the council member then made. In fact, in talking to this individual that made them, the council member actually phoned the union president of this individual and had a discussion.
Yeah, so Councillor Fox, there is going to be if the motion passes, an investigation, so just keep it to the motion.
So this is all part and parcel of that.
Just keep it to the motion.
Okay, so I will have more in closing, but that's my motion, and that's the reason it's on the table, and I would like this to continue forward and determine if we've crossed the line here. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you. Any further discussion on N1? Councillor Davis.
Okay. I'm wondering where this, I just wrote this down because I didn't want to get off track. I'm wondering where this is coming from. Is this a backlash to council members not agreeing on an issue, or is this really about bullying? I'm worried that this motion is just continually fueling a match, or I eliminated the word I was going to put there, a match, and is going to sterilize council, and we will be afraid to even open our mouths and give an opinion because we might offend someone. We're all adults here and elected for our differences of opinion. And I don't know if this needs to go any further, and I don't want this to become a problem with the integrity of our council. I mean, I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I've spent a great deal of time thinking about this because I think it's really important to be clear about having a position on what we perceive as being against cyberbullying. And I would never want anybody to think that I was ever in support, either through my own actions or condoning anybody else, to be in favor of any type of cyberbullying. However, that being said, I also want to put out there that I am challenged to think that we are considering using yet more legal resources in order to investigate this. And so I'm not sure that fanning the flames at this point would be helpful. I understand that we have a policy that potentially could be looked at to be updated, but I certainly don't recommend this as the manner in which we should be going about it. You know, people have talked before about the rationality of using a lot more of our limited resources on policing and handling complaints, because I have to extrapolate from this and say, if this is the case, and if we want to go in this direction, then what kind of measures are we going to take in order to follow up on this and to make sure that these policies are not being violated? So I do ask myself, who is going to be in charge of this? Is this something that we're going to have to create yet another layer of bureaucracy to do? I just really don't know, but I think that if you're going to make a policy, you should be aware of how it is that you're going to enforce it. So my final thought is, I totally support only responsible social media posting. I think that people have to take responsibility for the things that they put on there. And, you know, people have to wear those things one way or another. And so I just look at it as, you know, optics are what they are. People have to look at it and say, how would that look on me if I'm making those kind of comments? But in reality, many of our policies that are reflective of ourselves as councillors go right back to self-responsibility. You know, that's the nature of our job. We have to be able to monitor ourselves, and I think that goes all the way to social media. I think that there's also what we could promote in terms of what about these Facebook pages? Do they have somebody to block these kind of comments? Is there anybody who's actually going on there and saying, as the monitor of these pages, is this a responsible comment? I think that there, are things that we could do that go beyond this, because I really don't think, from my perspective, short of somebody saying something that's libelous or slanderous and crosses a legal line, we really need to be careful, because there is the element of free speech. There is the element of making sure that we are not scapegoating people that are doing their best under challenging circumstances at times to bring something forward. If I'm posting things, I'm always very careful that I put things out there. I have never been harassed or bullied. I don't know what that says, but I think it says something about the fact sometimes it's just the nature of what you post, the way that you post it, and the tone of your post. And so I just leave it at that. I don't think we should be taking extraordinary measures such as a legal opinion, because we've already made a big deal about how much we spent about this already, so I wouldn't support that.
Thank you. Councillor Sparrow.
Collect my thoughts here. I've listened now to these comments, and I have to say, this is about respect. It's about respect for each other around this table. It's about respect for our residents and respect for the job that we all hold, which, I think that there has definitely been a line that has been crossed, and I think we are the only ones who can hold each other accountable here. Being a mother and having 4 daughters, I keep kind of coming back to the thought of, if my daughters acted this way, or if my daughters were treated in a way, what would I want to have happen? And I would want someone to stand up, and I'd want someone to say it's not right, and I'd want my daughters to be taught that that's not the way that we treat each other. And, if we're all going to sit back and say we don't want to spend, any more funds on this, or we don't want to investigate this any further, and we don't want to limit people's ability for free speech, and all of these sort of excuses that we can kind of come up with about not standing up and actually saying something's wrong, how are we ever going to teach our kids what is right and what is wrong if we're going to sit back and allow this type of respect or disrespect to each other? And I've been on council now for 6 years, and it has not been a respectable workplace. I have not been treated with respect, and it is a very difficult thing to enforce and to police. And as Councillor Arneson said, you are controlling of your own actions, and each person definitely can act how they would like to act to each other. But I do think when lines are crossed, we need to stand up and say it's wrong. And when we're having residents write letters to us on council saying what they're seeing is upsetting to them, and the respect that they're seeing other council members give to members of this council in front of the public, I think that should be a wake-up call to all of us to sit back and say, how can we do better? How can we, learn from this and not be closed-minded to the fact that this is occurring, and just allow this to be what we deem as normal and we deem as what we should expect is sitting in these seats. It's not. We deserve better, and I am in support of this. And yes, it's unfortunate that we have to spend more money and that we have to look into this. It shouldn't be happening, but it has happened, and we can't turn a blind eye to it and pretend it's not happening any longer, because it needs to be addressed. So I'm going to support this, and I hope the rest of council does as well.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Thank you. This, I think we all got elected to council, and, that would be an indication that there is at least a significant number of people in the community that would support each one of us to be on this council. And yet I knew that when I got on council, it was very clear that we would have many disagreements on topics, and whether that's around development, whether that's around care of the environment, whether that's what road networks, whatever it is, we would simply not agree on every topic. There's 9 of us, and each of us represents different factions of the community, different people, different areas. We all live in different parts of the community, so it's highly expected that we'll have disagreements, and that's clear. I don't think you'd expect to have anything different. In fact, that's probably a healthy thing on a council, that we have a wide variety of opinions and perspectives, and that we don't always agree on those things. But that is, but in light of all of that, there is a level of respect that needs to occur even within those disagreements. And I think at a table like this, it's critical that our disagreements are in the open with each other, that we have those disagreements on topics, that we're not making it as a personal attack on people, but that we do respect each other, and we respect the thoughts that people have, the decisions that they make, and in the end, when we vote on things, we have a decision of council. And it is the council that makes that decision. It's not then time to go and spend time on social media talking about all the ways in which you disagreed with the decision that was just made by council. We have an obligation, a commitment to be working things out together as a group, and certainly there'll be disagreement, and certainly there'll be discussion, but in the end we make decisions as a council. I hear a lot of times people talk about free speech, and we need to protect free speech. I think it's important to remember that free speech is not saying whatever you want. Free speech is not being hateful towards other people. Free speech is not being prejudiced towards other people or racist or any of those kinds of things. That's not free speech. Free speech is not about being a bully. And if free speech is about speaking your opinion about an issue and a topic in an open, very respectful kind of format. And I think that it is very difficult for council at times and others with social media, because as you know, social media can do a lot of good things, but it can also be a very negative tool. And I remember when I was first very early elected, I went to a conference and I remember listening to one of the speakers talk about one of the biggest lessons that he had learned recently. He was a former provincial politician, and that was around social media and how we send messages, what we might send out on Twitter or on Facebook, and really talked a lot about taking time to think about very carefully what you're going to send. And if you're angry about something, wait at least 24 hours before you post anything. And it's amazing how that advice really does save a lot of people's careers and lives by just being really careful about what they send. I don't think social media is the right place for council members to debate their opinions with each other. I think we do that openly in meetings and in our formats and other kinds of meetings, but we shouldn't be debating those things as a council on social media. So I haven't been bullied. I haven't had those. I haven't had comments come to me from other council members through social media. At least I haven't seen them. Maybe they're out there, but I haven't seen them. I don't go looking around to see what people are saying about me on social media, to be honest. But I'm not going to say things about my fellow council members on social media. You won't find that from me, because I think it's important that we respect each other, even though we might disagree. And so I think we have a policy. We have a policy on a respectful workplace. And it certainly seems that policy may have been broken by this council, and so I don't think it's an issue. If you're going to have a policy, let's enforce the policy. The policy isn't there as a guide; it's actually a policy to guide and govern how we govern. And so I think we should be held accountable to that policy, and therefore I would support moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Richter.
Well, I think we should call this for what it really is. It's a Trumpian witch hunt. This council is angry with me, and so now they're bullying me, and they're doing it by projecting onto me things that I have not done. It is a complete and utter waste of township money to go get a legal opinion on the respectful workplace policy. There is nothing I have ever posted on Facebook that I would not stand behind. And there is also no way that I would ever say it's all right for this council to censure the access of its members to social media. That's just wrong. Now, The real issue here regards the catering for the 2017 farm tour. That's always been the issue. All of a sudden, though, now it's been twisted around to say, I'm bullying. No, I'm not bullying. I discovered something that occurred that I did not think was right, and I brought it to the light of day because it's my job to do this kind of thing. And it's not an easy job to do. You've just sat there and listened to a bunch of people dump on me for bringing to light an issue that needed to be made public. Now, in terms of money being spent to investigate anything, I actually think if we're going to spend money, we should be further investigating what happened with this contract that was awarded to a member of council. That's what's wrong here. It's not, in my opinion, that's what's wrong here. And I asked for further investigation because the reports that came to council initially were very, very sketchy. And even now, reading back through them, it's hard to make heads nor tails out of the email chain where one company comes in more expensive than another company, and the company that comes in more expensive ends up setting the menu and ends up getting the contract. It's not clear, but I said, let's put this behind us. Let's say this was just a comedy of errors. What happened has happened. It was not it wasn't a big amount of money. But what we should be doing now is making sure it never happens again. That's the problem. Leaving this door open to allow members of this council to bid on township work. That's double dipping. That's not right. And as part of the investigation...
I have a point of order.
Point of order. Could you speak to the motion, please?
Thank you. If you could keep your comments to the motion.
I am keeping my comments to the motion. The motion is about going after me. So I get it. You guys are angry at me. So why don't you just simply censure me here and now, save the council some money, save the township some money, because you're not going to be happy until you've manufactured enough evidence to make a censure happen. So go ahead, censure me. And I have a question for you, Mr. Mayor. A member of this council declared a conflict on this issue. Not once, but twice.
I'm sorry.
Yet that member who declared a conflict on this issue, and it says right here in the motion regarding the catering for the 2017 farm tour, did not honor that conflict previously stated, but in fact seconded this motion. How is that possible? My understanding is if you declare a conflict on something, you walk out of the room. You do not participate in the debate. You do not influence the debate. You have declared a conflict.
So you've asked me a question regarding the conflict. I can't, as we all know on this council, only a member of council can declare a conflict. I can't declare a conflict on behalf of another member of council. As I read this motion, there is only one actual motion. There's a couple of whereases, but the motion does not, the motion itself does not refer to any catering contract. Is there whereas that does? Not the motion. So the motion, I don't see the connection. But the whereas, yes, you're correct. There's a whereas there, but that's not the motion. The motion is very clear. That it be resolved that council requests a legal opinion as to whether respectful workplace policy has been violated as it pertains to this policy, etc. As we can see there, it does not, the motion does not limit itself only to social media. It limits itself to the respectful workplace policy. And so that's, but it's not up to me as mayor to tell any member of council that they're in conflict. It is up to each member of council, and we're all very well aware of that. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Councillor Richter.
So is the intent of this motion to apply to everybody that sits on this council?
I would hope so.
Or is the intent of this motion just to apply to me?
I would hope so. and
Okay,
I will
so
have my
it will
comments in the
include
end.
things like throwing pens across room at people. It will include things like throwing coffee cups at employees. It will include things like behavior while representing council on other committees. It will include a wide range of things.
Councillor Richter, it will apply to what has been discussed in this motion. So, and certainly we do have a respectful workplace policy. And upon receiving that email that was read out, I did forward it to all members of council, and I heard nothing back. A few apologies would have been nice, and probably would have resolved all of this, but quicker. But nevertheless, we're here, and the motion is on the table, and it's I'm fully prepared to learn from this, and it doesn't just point its finger at any one particular councillor. It has opened up that maybe some other councillors have violated this, and including myself, if I have. I have nothing to hide, and be quite happy to hear the results of this. So if that answered your question.
Okay, well, my final comment is I believe this motion is ultra vires. We are not here as a body to control social media, and this is attempting to do just that, and that is wrong.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Well, I feel I should say something, and I think the most thing that comes to my mind is you can't legislate good manners. You can't legislate common sense. I think you can ask members of council, staff, and the citizenry to have more respect for each other. Social media can be a bit of a trap that we can all fall into, but I think it's time we moved on. I think we owe it to those that elected us here and to the citizens of the township to keep decorum at the table. Issues should be discussed here at the council table and in meetings, in properly called meetings. Everything else that happens outside, well, you know, I guess it's fun and it's addictive, but it's not what we should be dealing with. When we deal with issues in the township, they should be at this table. So I'd prefer that we just move on and just try harder to get along and put some of this stuff behind us.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or comments? Councillor Fox.
Well, I'll close if this is...
Well, Councillor Davis wanted to speak, so if you wish to... Okay, I'll let Councillor Davis, then I'll put it back to Councillor Fox. Councillor Davis?
I'm sitting here, and I'm shaking. And my gut feeling tells me that this problem has gone north. It should be going south. Talking to this motion, you know, I like Councillor Blair said, I've never been bullied. I've been teased. Lots of things. Even Councillor Fox threw a pen and just about got me one time, and I'm not going to hold you to that. But when I start to get this way, I start to think, hey, there's something wrong here. We got a member of council backing up into a corner. No, she's actually not backing up. You can't back her up into a corner. But you've got somebody, council here, that I see that the problem has been showed. We've gone in a direction. I said it once. Is this a backlash to a council members not agreeing on an issue? Or is this really about bullying? I think that this has gone to a defense, and in my opinion, I haven't seen any. You get your feelings hurt when somebody picks on you, but this is the chair we sit on, and I don't think I've seen anybody spit or any bad things like that. So, and for fear of rambling on, I just wanted to say that I've never felt this way, except maybe the first meeting or second meeting, and I had to public speak. And I know my body, and in my opinion, this is just going on and on and on, and it's got to stop, because this is our township, and we're in. This is getting to the point where it's silly, but it didn't start silly, because it started with a farm tour and dinner, and it's just gone the wrong way. So I'm not going to support this. I don't think it's got a lot to do with hateful, racist, or anything like that, and those are good points, but If there's low self-esteem or something like that happening, that doesn't mean you have to jump up and down and start to defend yourself by some other means. So I'm sorry, I've said my piece, that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Fox?
So, am I closing?
Yeah, unless
Okay.
there are still the rules if somebody else wishes to speak.
Let me address a couple of things. Councillor Richter, you and I have sat here for 12 years. And I'll unequivocally say...
Speak to the motion, though.
I will.
Okay.
I'm not angry with you. I'm bloody furious at what you did.
Okay, Councillor Fox, if we just speak to the motion, okay? They're not...
You and I have had our battles.
Councillor Fox, just speak to the motion.
I am.
Okay,
I'm closing. Councillor Arneson, your words were outstanding in terms of where social media can go wrong. Social media is not where we do business at this table, Councillor Long. You're right. We do business at this table. I was actually very embarrassed the last meeting. I don't know if any of you were here. There were 32 young girls here. I'll bet you not one of them ever runs for politics.
Okay. Councillor Fox, if you just speak to the motion, and then
the situation here, we can sweep this under the rug. We can do a lot of things, but when citizens come and question me about what happens at that table, do I say this is allowable? Or do I say, no, there are mechanisms to deal with this? I've chosen to say there's mechanisms to deal with this. This is about an issue. If the person chooses to take the issue to heart, and personally, that's fine. There's nobody on this council that's been bullied more than me over social media. And if anybody questions that, fine. I can show you. I've got evidence. In fact, this is not the first time that this has happened to me with Councillor Richter. I want this to go away too. But do we have a policy, or do we just sweep it under the table and say, let's move on? Councillor Qualley, I heard her say she's never going to do it again a long time ago. But there it is. Right in the social media context still. Again and again, it's shared by people, comments are shared, and so on and so on and so forth. This has to stop. Councillor Arneson, if you can wave a magic wand today, your magic wand would be the one I want waved. Because I don't want the business of this council taken over social media. Social media is the most devastating, absolutely devastating tool that's used in politics today, and we can see that in neighboring municipalities. We see it in Maple Ridge. We see it in Pitt Meadows. We see it in abundance of local lower mainland, and I have no idea what happens up north. But we need to just respect each other. It says it. Everyone is treated with respect and dignity, and social media is the worst form of respecting anybody of dealing with anybody with respect and dignity. And if a line's crossed, a line's crossed. Are we holding people accountable for crossing a line, or are we just saying, oh, it's nice, let's go? You know what? This isn't acceptable. In my opinion, that's the root of my motion. I want to get this dealt with. I want to know if I'm wrong, fine. I'm wrong. I'll admit it. If Councillor Richter's wrong and she has crossed the line, then there may be a consequence. I'm not. You've admitted defeat. Censor me now. No. I'm not about to do that.
Why? Because you want to drag it out longer?
Okay, we'll move on to the next. Okay, thank you. Councillor Richter.
Yeah. This is what I mean. This is not right. This is a waste of money. I followed proper channels. I saw something that happened. I didn't think it was right. I reported it to the administrator. The administrator had an investigation done. The investigation resulted in a report. I wrote an email to council, all of council. I got an email back from the mayor saying, make it a motion. I made it a motion. And then I withdrew the motion and made it a very generic motion. What did I do wrong other than my job? And you're a politician. If you can't stand the heat, then you shouldn't be in the kitchen, period. This is a job where everybody has an opinion about everything, and they're not always going to agree with you. But to go on a witch hunt because you didn't like another person's opinion, that's just wrong.
Thank you. No, thank you. You've spoken twice, and I've spoken once. I'm just going to wrap it up. This is a very serious, I think it's very serious. Council's taken this very seriously. From what I've heard from the comments from all members of Council, I really do appreciate what Council has said. I think, and we do have a respectful workplace policy. It was brought to our attention by a member of the public and responded to by myself, and also to Council by, as I said earlier, putting a copy of the respectful workplace policy on distribution list, just to remind all of us what our rules are. This is an opinion that would take it away from Council, and that's an important point. We're not here to do a witch hunt. We're here to look at the policy that has been approved by Council by an independent person. A legal opinion is not a member of Council, so having somebody independent to take a look at it. And as I said earlier, there may be more than one member of Council that has breached this. There may be not. There may not be any. But perhaps we can learn from this and move forward in a positive way, not in a negative way. I totally agree that difference of opinion, having great debates, having a diversity on our Council is healthy, and I embrace that. And however, there was a concern. Councillor Fox has raised it with this motion. The motion is very clear, and it would go to somebody who's independent of this Council, so that we're not here to defend or accuse. We're here to say, okay, was this violated? And that I can support. And as I said, I have nothing to hide. Hopefully we can all learn from this and move forward. And perhaps out of this will come a stronger policy. Maybe it will come a social media policy. Maybe that's what we need on this Council. I don't know. But hopefully we can learn from this. So I didn't get the last word in. Councillor Long gets the last word. Councillor Long.
Got the second speech. I think we have learned, and I think we can move on. And I don't think we want to bring somebody else in. We're dealing, at the table here amongst us. We've talked about it. Everyone's had an opinion. Bringing somebody else in from the outside, there's money involved, and it's just going to keep the thing rolling. I hope we don't do that.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Arneson.
I was the last speaker.
Sorry.
Doesn't matter.
You spoke twice.
That's okay.
That's sorry.
Yes,
that's unacceptable.
Yeah, that is.
I said, am I
okay.
the last speaker?
Right.
But Councillor Fox, there is but Councillor Fox, we do have a procedural bylaw that allows everyone to speak twice.
Go,
yeah.
have at it.
And
I don't care.
we can. Councillor Arneson, if you wish to speak, you do have the floor, because we do have a policy that allows for two. We can ask for being the last one, but I can't enforce that. I'm sorry.
Okay. Here's my magic wand, and it was very wise words from my father. When in doubt, he would always tell me, least said, soonest mended. I like that as an axiom to say, if we have determined as a council that I think we've gone over this to the degree that I feel is perfectly necessary and fine, that it's been widely discussed, I just think that it would be in everybody's best interest if we can just consider this behind us and move forward. Maybe not everybody agrees with that, but I think that there's a lot of truth in that old axiom.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call the question on N1. And the motion carries. Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Davis, Councillor Long opposed. Move on to development phasing. I'm going to clear the queue here. And Councillor Sparrow, put you on. Just give me a second here. Councillor Sparrow, you're on.
Thank you. So I'll just read my motion. Whereas other regional municipalities are using development phasing as a means to curb urban sprawl, ensure cost-effective and orderly development, and to enhance the coordination between the province, region, and local municipalities. Whereas the creation of this type of phasing strategy could change the way the township develops the community as a whole, and whereas whereas development phasing is not something we currently have a strategy for or have implemented in our OCP or NCP process, therefore be it resolved that Council directs staff to provide a report on the creation of a township development phasing strategy with the focus on starting the implementation within the Brookswood-Fern Ridge NCP planning process, and that the report include a presentation to be given to Council in an upcoming CPC meeting. I so move.
Thank you. Second
and I would like to speak, if possible, on it.
Yeah, you've got the floor. So moved by Councillor Sparrow, second by Councillor Qualley.
Perfect. So I'm hoping that Council will support this. I think we've heard from most recently the members of the public in regards to the Brookswood-Fern Ridge OCP process about the request for phasing. This was something years previous to that I had brought up as well in regards to our Willoughby neighbourhood, and I think it certainly is something that could benefit our community as a whole. So I am hopeful that Council will agree to have staff come back with a report. I just want to preface that by saying this isn't, and I hope we don't get stuck in a debate tonight on the merits of phasing. This is a request and a motion for a report and for to start of that discussion. So I do realize that there are lots of questions and lots of implementation questions and how this would all look, and that's where I hope that we can have those discussions, have a fulsome talk about it in a CPC meeting, and really start to dive into what this could look like for our community. Other regions are using this. We certainly don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are other communities, and I can certainly provide Council with some of my research and some of my reading that I've been doing on it as well, but I hope we can just start the process of having a discussion. It's certainly something that's top of mind that we've heard from the community, and I think a new way of us looking at our development. So I'm hopeful Council will support the start of this and starting to just talk about it as a Council in this report fashion. So like the rest of Council.
Thank you. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Well, thank you, Councillor Sparrow, for bringing this to Council. I think that the idea of having this conversation around phasing could be very helpful. I think we've had lots of discussion around phasing as it has applied to possibly the Brookswood-Fern Ridge Community Plan, and we've had lots of different opinions on this Council on that topic without necessarily having sort of a staff report or an in-depth discussion around that with the help of staff. And so I do think that beginning the conversation around phasing strategy would be helpful. However, I would like to make an amendment to this motion, and that is that because as you've stated, the intention is to just begin the conversation and to have a good, healthy conversation around the topic of phasing, I think that it would be best to not get it tied up in the discussion around the Brookswood-Fern Ridge OCP. I think that it's not that it could never apply to the Brookswood-Fern Ridge OCP. I just think that to tell staff that we'd like them to develop a strategy and with them thinking already, even before we've had the discussion, that we need to start thinking about Brookswood, I think that would be premature. I think it would be helpful if we actually just took the sentence out or the reference to Brookswood-Fern Ridge, talked about directing staff to provide a report on the creation of a township, not a Brookswood, but a township development phasing strategy that would apply no matter where we are building, no matter where we are developing, and no matter where the neighborhood plans might be, that we have some kind of phasing strategy that we could begin to talk about, and bringing that report to Council at an upcoming Council Priorities Committee meeting. That to me would be the first step. If at the end we decided later on, once we've developed the strategy and think, hey, this would be great to put into Brookswood, we could then make that decision at that time. But I think it's premature to tie it to Brookswood, Fernridge, OCP at the beginning stage. And so my amendment would be to take out any reference to Brookswood, Fernridge in your motion.
Thank you. So if you make an amendment, then what I'm hearing is that you take the words that after Township Development Phasing Strategy, then you take out the words with a focus of starting the implementation with the Brookswood Furniture NCP planning process. So
Yes.
take those words out. So it would just be Township Development Phasing Strategy, and that the report, including a presentation, be given to council. Is
That's my amendment.
Okay, is there seconded by Councillor Qualley? I'll open up Amendment 1. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Richter?
I think that's wrong. I think that Councillor Sparrow was trying to address an issue that has come up repeatedly from the community with regards to Brookswood Fernridge, and I am planning to support her motion, but I certainly won't support it without Brookswood Fernridge in there, because that's what started all this. So I'm not going to support this amendment. I think it's a cop-out.
Thank you. Councillor Qualley?
I mean, Brookswood Fernridge is part of the township, so I think if we look at the implementation township-wide and what that means, I'm anxious to understand the pros and cons. I understand there are both. So I'll support the motion with the amendment that Councillor Whitmarsh put forward. We have other neighbourhood plans on the books that are currently being developed. So I think this is an opportunity to talk about all of them at the same time, so we don't end up with sort of pockets of phasing and different pieces going on. I think it's important that there's consistency throughout the township. So I welcome the discussion, and based on the staff discussion, if we decide to make it more specific, we can certainly do that then, but I think looking at it holistically would provide more value than looking at it just at one piece at a time.
Thank you. Councillor Long?
I'm going to say this here, and also when we vote on the motion, a discussion about development in general, planning, and phasing should happen. And I don't think we should be waiting to a CPC. I think we're booked up to 2019. I think we should have a presentation in front of council as soon as possible on the whole concept of not just phasing, but also how we develop communities to begin with. How we fit in with the urban containment boundary, how we deal with ALC land, ALR lands, and how we deal with our neighborhood plans that already exist that we're not necessarily supportive of, or we have some concerns over it. So I guess I'll say this now, and I'm going to say it again later on, that we need to have a presentation by staff and really dig into the whole concept of phasing everywhere, including Brookswood. And what strategy? I mean, the motion talks about the lack of strategies. I think there are some strategies, and there's some common sense issues that drive development as well. So we need to talk about all those things.
Thank you, Councillor Sparrow.
I do appreciate the comments. I think that, first of all, it was important to me that it is township-wide, so that this wouldn't be piecemeal, one part of the community versus the other. And I do think it is important, although I understand the idea of sort of tying us to this, to the Brookswood area. I think it's important, as that is really the next big area of where we're going to see development in the community. Willoughby is, nearing completion of their NCP process, and Brookswood is the next to go. And I think that we need to make sure that we have it tied to that, so there's an understanding that that is where we would want to see the implementation begin. Now, the NCP process within Brookswood is still a long process. Isn't something that's going to be done overnight. The NCP process and planning process, just as the OCP one, still involves a lot of community input and time and staff time. So this isn't something that we are handcuffed in, that this process would be done next month. I think we have a lot of time still to go in the Brookswood area to have our planning process be complete, and I think it's important that we have this discussion in regards to Brookswood. So I am hesitant, and I guess not in support of removing Brookswood from the equation in this motion. And I do, again, want to preface that this is a discussion. This isn't us deciding right now whether or not we're going to be doing phasing in our community. It's the start of that discussion. And so I hope council will at least support that much of us having that discussion. And I would like to address possibly after this motion, the CPC Council priority meetings scheduling, as I did hear us being booked up for that, and some that may need to be adjusted of maybe being at a council meeting, although I wanted to ensure that we have quite a lot of time to discuss it, so we may need to talk about that. But anyways, I just want to say that I think it's important that we start this phasing discussion within Brookswood, and I won't support removing that.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I was concerned about the timeline the minute you put the PP committee in there, because it is going to go a long way. And I also thought to take the creation of the township development phasing strategy with a focus, I would have put that behind, I would have changed that around. But I think that development phasing totally over the whole township is probably more what we should be looking at. But after saying that, Brookswood's kind of the next thing, so that's why I could see why we could implement it or use it for Brookswood. But thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Well, in a way, I agree with Councillor Whitmarsh, because, we have Smith and we have Williams, actually, that are way ahead of Brookswood. So if we're going to talk about a staff report on a phasing strategy, why don't we do it where we can ask staff to develop the strategy and see how that strategy applies to something that's really much closer to reality than Brookswood Fernridge neighborhood plans are, that being Smith and Williams. So in fact, that doesn't preclude the fact that it won't apply potentially with the Brookswood Fernridge NCP plans, but they haven't even been developed yet, where Smith and Williams have. Well, no, Williams is in process, right, Mr. Seffi? Smith has. Smith's got fourth reading. So why don't we start with Smith and see how it would apply in Smith? I mean, it's got a lot of similarities to the bigger Brookswood picture when you have 208th down the middle and 72nd on the south. It really does have a lot of characteristics that are similar, because you've got a main arterial road going right through it. And so I can see where Councillor Whitmarsh's idea is, okay, let's start before we get to Brookswood Fernridge. Let's start with something and see how the phasing strategy could work in something like Smith.
Yep. Councillor Whitmarsh.
Yeah, I appreciate all the feedback and discussion. I think it's because we have time. I think that's exactly the reason why we shouldn't have this focused on one particular area of our community, because we do have time. If this was an imminent issue that we had to resolve right away, then it would make more sense. But because it's not, because we have time, because the neighborhood plans are in development and will take time in Brookswood, and because we have other ones, as Councillor Fox mentioned, that are ahead, it makes sense to me that we develop a strategy for the entire township and not become encumbered or have the conversation become biased through the lens of Brookswood, when it really should be a conversation that's about the township. And this doesn't preclude, if we take that out, it doesn't preclude that it would be applied to Brookswood. We'd have plenty of time to do that. I'm certainly open to hearing comments from and information from staff about the timing. Maybe it's better than at a CPC meeting. Maybe a regular meeting might be better. But I do really believe that the Brookswood, Fernridge, and NCP needs to be removed, and I would have difficulty supporting it because of how it will change the conversation about developing a general plan for the township. I'd have difficulty supporting it without the removal.
Thank you. Councillor Arneson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I want to speak in favor of total support for the original motion. I don't see any necessity actually to change the language, because, we're going to complicate it more, I think, than necessary by then throwing Willoughby in there, which is, from my perspective, a completely different beast. So I would register with the fact, like other councillors have mentioned, I think timeliness is important. I know it seems like, well, we haven't really started any neighbourhood plans there, and so, what's the big rush? Well, actually, the big rush is that we're considering a stream of applications that are going through that are not connected to any neighborhood plans. And I hope that doesn't continue, because I don't know how long it's going to take to create neighborhood plans. But concurrently, I think we should be looking at what would be a good strategy for phasing, because I think that it is warranted under the circumstances. And so I support not the amendment, but the original motion.
Thank you. Councilor Sparrow.
Yeah, just a quick comment in regards to the implementation of it through the two remaining Willoughby plans. I felt it was a little ambitious of us to think that we could maybe get that all a phasing strategy agreed upon and completed and start the implementation within the Willoughby plans. I think it's important to the development community and to our community that we have this process in an NCP that's being created, and to just sort of all of a sudden put it in at the last second into a process or a plan like the Smith and Williams that are almost done or have been completed, I didn't feel was probably the best way to start this process. So looking at Willoughby being the next part of our community where we have these NCPs that haven't even been created yet, felt to me like the right place to implement a new strategy like this. Obviously, this would be a township-wide strategy, and so it would apply to the remaining part of our community, but I felt it would be too ambitious of us to expect that that would be done within the remaining two plans, or the remaining plans within Willoughby. So that was why I did focus it on Brookswood. We've heard from the public most recently in regards to the Brookswood need for, and their desire for phasing. That's why the words are in there. It's not to handcuff us or to make it, something more difficult. I think it's just to acknowledge that those NCPs are really the next starting process for planning, and that Willoughby is nearing or has been almost completed in that process. And so that's why I wanted to indicate that would be the process. So I hope Council will agree to start the conversation. I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none.
Just on the amendment?
Just on the amendment, to remove those words. I do support the amendment. I think it's more to have a holistic discussion first would be excellent. So I'm calling the question on N2 amendment. And the amendment carries with Councillor Richter, Councillor Arneson, Councillor Sparrow, Councillor Davis opposed. So we're back to the main motion as amended. There is a speaker's list. Councillor Richter, do you wish to speak to the main motion as amended?
Yeah, I think it's pretty watered down now. I think Councillor Sparrow's intent was good, and I think that what she was proposing in terms of starting it out with Brookswood Fernridge would have been ideal. But this is just trying to take attention away from Brookswood Fernridge, and I think that's wrong, so I won't be supporting it as amended.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Long?
Well, I think we're going to have a good conversation, and we need to have it soon. So I'd like to see that this come to council before CPC meeting. So, and yes, we'll need enough time, so we should have a presentation at the beginning of a meeting and allow some time for discussion, perhaps in the afternoon or whatever works.
I'll ask Mr. Backen. I know we're kind of we've got a lot of work with budget, but CPC, what is on the agenda, and could we have this advanced CPC? We have to get through budget, and we're spending a lot of time on that rather than having CPC meetings. But what does our agenda look like? Agenda items for CPC.
So, Your Worship, effectively we had CPC items from January, which is our next CPC meeting, until be May. Council could simply tell us to slot this in at a CPC meeting in any one of those months to take priority over the remaining things in the queue.
Your Worship, I think it should be sooner than later. So if it has to be a CPC, it should be high priority.
Yeah, and so that can be done by motion or it would just be done by direction to move it up, or do you need motion?
We could take some direction, Your Worship. The only I guess qualification is we'd have to actually spend a bit of time strategizing on the work that needs to be done prior to the meeting. So it might be February. I don't know.
No, we totally understand it, especially with the workload with the budget ahead of us. So February, March, I think they could take a direction for that. So okay, thank you, Councillor Sparrow.
Yes, I just wanted to say one more last thing. I am accepting of the motion or the amendments, although I didn't wasn't ideally what I wanted to see. I hope that I will speak now on the main motion and hope that council supports it, because I would hate to see us throw the baby out with the bathwater and not actually have this discussion that's necessary because of that amendment. So I hope council will support it, and I look forward to us diving into this and having a bigger discussion that's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call a question on N2. And it carries with Councillor Richter opposed. Is there any other business? Councillor Davis.
Yes, thank you. In new business here, last council meeting, November 6th, regarding development permit 100890, 48th and 275th. I had some issues trying to find out where the creek was. New information has been brought to my attention. I received information from Mr. Steffi that identified this statutory right-of-way as in fact a creek. Mayor and Council received an email from LEPS confirming that this is a Class B or yellow-coated creek. Going forward, my concern is how can we authorize any activity on this creek that does not comply with today's current DFO regulations and our own streamlined protection bylaws. I am not comfortable that we, Council, voted on this thinking it was a statutory right-of-way when in fact it was a creek. I've been up on the site, on the road, and it doesn't look like the connections have been made yet. So I'd like to move that we make an amendment on any further activity on this property until such time we can be assured that any work being done complies with today's current DFO, Ministry of Environment, and our own streamside protection bylaws. So move.
Are you making a notice of motion or making a motion?
So move now.
Okay. Generally, we make a notice of motion, give us some time. Mr. Backen, I guess I can take it as a motion or not. It's can deal with it right now. Yeah. 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 I'll just get some direction from staff. Normally, it's a notice of motion for something that would be this.
Well,
important.
maybe we can get some advice from Mr. Backen.
Your Worship, it's a substantive motion. The council does have the prerogative to make their own decision as to whether they wish to proceed with it now or refer it for a notice of motion. Is it a time-sensitive issue in terms of the concerns of Councillor Davis?
Well, I'm thinking that I was up to see the site, and they seem to be moving right along with it, going down the road, and there's just one little part, I think, that's not done. And the part that would connect the West Creek, supposedly the West Creek, that would go down, is it 48th? Is it 48th? And then connect onto the property, and that hasn't been put in yet.
Your Worship, I understand the sensitivity. The challenge we have is that the ability to enforce or to stop work, if you will, is dependent upon a jurisdictional issue, and usually that can be done in the context of a rezoning. Here we understand it's being done in the context of a DP. I'm sensitive to the fact that the DP does make reference to a location that could affect a potential watercourse, but we're now putting effectively stopping work on a project with limited information. If we're satisfied that the urgency is there and we're prepared to go down that path, that's fine. Again, now, having said that, Mr. Seffi is a bit more familiar, I think, with the actual right-of-way and locations. So I don't know if we can speak to all the issues, but Mr. Seffi, do you have any comments on the right-of-way and the creek and the stream and those sorts of issues?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Your Worship, I'd like to first of all clarify what Councillor Davis said. I did not. I believe Councillor Davis just said that during my conversation with him that I advised that there was a creek on this property. I did not advise as such. What I said to Councillor Davis during my discussion was that there was no watercourse on the property. In fact, it was eliminated many years ago as part of a DFO authorization, and it was in fact replaced with a pipe. It is with an underground sewer system.
Okay, you told me. Yes. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if I provided a sort of a incorrect or my comments were misunderstood by Councillor Davis, or whether I wasn't clear enough in how I conveyed the information. But the fact is that there is no watercourse on the property. That was the subject of the development permit at the last meeting. Council authorized the issuance of the DP. The watercourse was eliminated many years ago. I don't know exactly how many years ago, but as part of a DFO authorization, it was replaced with an underground storm sewer system. The storm sewer system is within a right-of-way, a statutory right-of-way, that is, as part of the proposed development, being relocated. And the intent is for the building, or the proposed building, will then sit on where the current statutory right-of-way and the pipe currently exist. There is a watercourse to the downstream and the upstream end. There's a water body in the form of a pond downstream. There's a watercourse to the upstream, the south side of the highway, that drains through the pipe system into the pond. But there is no watercourse on the property. That is not correct. The property does not contain a watercourse.
I can't buy that.
So-
Because if it's
so-
south
okay.
and if it's north, where does it go? It has to be in the pipe.
It is. It's
So
not a
then
watercourse.
West Creek runs through the pipe.
So your motion, as I understand it,
Okay,
if
so
you just say the motion again, because I recall the last meeting I had to rule on a couple of similar motions because we're looking at a form, setting, and character on a development permit, not on a rezoning. And
Okay.
so
But
I'm
what-
not even sure if I can even accept
Okay,
the motion.
so,
can you just repeat it again, please?
my motion is that, and maybe we could do some wording here, maybe if I could be helped out. I move that this is what I've got, that we make an amendment on any further activity on this property until such time that we can be assured that any work being done complies with today's current DFO, Ministry of Environment regulations, and our own streamside protection bylaws. So,
So I'm
is there
gonna-
any way that we can reword that?
So I'm going to ask Mr. Backen, as I understand, this is a development permit, and what Councillor Davis is referring to is outside the jurisdiction of the development permit. Perhaps you could help me out, Mr. Backen.
It may be, but perhaps Mr. Seffi, again, after hearing it, can advise if the existing system complies with or did comply with the requirements of the day. That would be the bylaws the township had in place or the MOE DFO rules that were in place in that day. We can't apply current laws retroactively, but we can certainly make sure that the traditional works do comply with our regime, given the fact that they complied with the regulations of the day. But Mr. Seffi, can you comment at all about the substantive issues that concerns the council?
The substantive issues, I believe, is the existence of a watercourse, which doesn't exist. That there's a water pipe, there's a storm sewer system that has replaced the watercourse that used to exist on the site, pursuant to the authorization issued by the Department of Fisheries and Ocean at the time that the application was made. And subsequent to that, there was, well, as part of that process, there was a statutory right-of-way registered, as well as a covenant registered that requires protection of the detention facility, or the pond, the environmental area downstream of the storm sewer pipe, and everything that is being proposed, that was being considered by council, part of the application, that the development permit that was issued by council at the last meeting, complies with all of those requirements. The covenants are registered on the title, as well as the statutory right-of-way. Everything is in compliance with the rules at the time of the enclosure of the watercourse, as well as the current rules in terms of the requirements of the protection pursuant to the covenant.
Okay, first of all, I guess maybe I should apologize. I put you in a spot there. At the end of our conversation that I had with you, you had texted me an email on what we had talked about. And I guess I took for granted that if water goes in this end and comes out that end, it has to be a creek. Well, okay. I watched the proponent stand right here and say there's fish up on it. Where the hell do fish live? They live in a creek.
Have to be a creek, Mr.
It must be a creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's flowing downhill. Creeks don't flow uphill.
Okay, let Mr. Backen please respond, and if
Can I just say a point of order?
sure.
Because
Sure. Point of order from Councillor Sparrow. Good.
Are we, like, this really feels like a notice of motion to me, that the amount of misinformation or communication regarding staff, and the motion's not even worded really, shouldn't this be just read out as a notice of motion and then debate happening when an actual motion is on the table? Because it feels very,
Yes.
weird that we're doing this way.
That is a possibility. However, Councillor Davis has asked staff to assist him with some wording.
So is that something they do afterwards, or do they do it during the meeting?
They can do it now. It's other business, so it's perfectly acceptable to.
They write to write the motion during the meeting?
Sure.
Oh, okay.
It's perfectly acceptable. It's it's not as efficient, but it is acceptable. It is other business.
Well,
so Mr. Backen, I would like to speak.
To clarify, Your Worship, I suppose if it's an emergent issue, then that may be the reason why it needs to be dealt with in a more timely manner, and that's for the person presenting the matter to decide. But a couple of comments and then perhaps a solution, although I'm not sure it's going to be worked that well. The comment, I guess, is something that we've experienced in the last few months about this very issue. That is, where does a yellow-coated or red-coated stream stop and start? And after actually talking to a number of environmentalists, environmental scientists, I should be careful about that, the way they explained it to me was that effectively the stream, the classification, doesn't necessarily represent the caliber of the watercourse, but it represents a designation for the section of the watercourse in terms of what's taking place. And again, I may not state this appropriately, but if you have a yellow-coated stream going into a pipe and comes out the other end, the coating may apply to the open surface, but may not apply to the enclosed surface. The enclosed surface becomes a repository, or it becomes the actual source of the water for the stream or for the yellow-coated area itself. But it doesn't necessarily mean that inside the pipe is going to be something that has a coating associated with it. That's what I understand. So with that backdrop, we're just being very sensitive that there's implications if we were to actually go down a path with jurisdiction that could be a bit challenging, or if we're beyond the scope of the development permit itself. Having said all of that, as was referenced, notice of motion is an issue, or another is an option, or another option might be to simply say, can we reconsider the DP itself? And then if there's a willing to reconsider it, that does provide some options in terms of what the direction may actually be. But at this point, we do have an issued DP. If the DP is to be reconsidered, that may lift, I guess, the issue in terms of work proceeding until there's disposition of what happens with that if it's referred, if that's the will of council.
So, and then motion to motion to reconsider requires proper notification of council under a procedural bylaw. However, council could waive that by, would it be a 2/3? No, a majority. So if council wishes to waive that requirement under procedural bylaw, the motion to reconsider could come on the floor at this meeting. Is that correct? So Councillor Davis, based on that information from Mr. Backen, perhaps the appropriate course of action would be to ask for a motion to reconsider the development permit application. And then, first of all, there would have to be a motion of council to allow the variance on a procedural bylaw to allow the reconsideration, and then you could ask for the reconsideration of the development permit.
Okay, I guess Mr. Backen talked about an emerging issue. The reason I say that is the Township of Langley in a position where we're giving them permission to move a creek, and it's at this point it is up in the air where the creek is, but our own agency tells us it's okay. And I'm concerned that if they do move the creek and they do establish so that they've rerouted the creek, are we going to be in a problem where we gave them permission? Because if we reconsider, I'm just worried that they're going to hook that thing up and they're going to move it, and then we're going to get in trouble because if the new DFO regulations, they talk differently about a creek than they did 1978 or back then. They moved it by the rules. They moved it, but can they move it now by the rules? Because all there is a distinction between a statute of right-of-way and a creek, and the township has given council that information that it is a statutory right-of-way. Now, I hope we're not going to. I don't want to. I didn't vote for it, but I just don't want to get township in trouble.
Point of order. Okay. Point of order has been called, Councillor Long. So we do need to.
This is a serious issue. brought up by council, can we please refer it to staff and get a report back right away tomorrow in a memo? Because there's different information, different maps we should be looking at.
Well, we need.
I don't think we can deal with it here or reconsider the DP. I think that's going to be.
Okay, but we need to go through the process. So
Let's just refer Councillor Davis's concern to staff for an immediate response. Well, I mean, whenever they can get it, as soon as possible.
but we need to deal with it.
Or would it be better, I see your thinking, would it maybe be better to put this in notice of motion, but if we move it, if they dig the hole tomorrow and move it, and we're in the wrong, we're kind of hooped.
So Mr. Backen.
So comments to both Councillor Davis's comments and Councillor Long's comments. We'll try. The challenge again comes down to, I guess, what is being relocated as part of the development permit. Is it a open water course or is it a closed pipe system? It appears, from what we're hearing, that it's a closed pipe system for which the standards of relocation are effectively going to be to act as the repository of the flow and then to have be the emergent area of the flow to ensure that the same, I guess, quality of water can therefore occur. I think that's what Mr. Seffi, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, is indicating that they've been satisfied historically. If, however, we feel there's an emergent issue and then reconsideration is not the issue, is not appropriate, then the other option, again, considering what you're saying about the timing concern, because this work could start quickly, would perhaps be to refer it then to staff for a very quick memo or report that can be distributed to council fairly quickly, and this still could take a matter of days, upon which time council, if they thought there was still an emergent issue, could then go through the process to try to schedule a meeting between now and the next meeting, so we have those abilities to call additional meetings for emergent issues. So that might be another suggestion to this if that result came forward. Mr. Seffi, what's your feeling on the time frame it would take to prepare such a memo or report?
We could provide the memo to council as soon as later this week. But just again, to reiterate, I apologize if I'm not making myself clear. There used to be a creek on the site. The creek is no longer there. It was replaced, not moved, replaced with a pipe. So there is a creek that feeds into that pipe, and that pipe leads into a pond. The creek is no longer there. And the replacement of the creek with a pipe was based on approval from the DFO. Now, 2017, what's being proposed is to relocate that pipe, not a creek, not an open water course, an enclosed pipe storm sewer system. The proposal is to relocate it from one location on the site to another location to accommodate a building. We can restate that in a memo, but that was essentially what the staff report stated when the development permit was being considered by council last meeting.
The last meeting?
Yeah.
But the last meeting, I couldn't get an answer where the creek was.
So to be clear, it wasn't a report. There is no creek, it's a pipe. So it wasn't a report. Mr. Seffi has given us a verbal report. I think we have enough this council could make some decisions tonight. If you wish to ask council to waive the requirement of the procedure bylaw to bring the reconsideration motion on the floor, then that might be an appropriate action. This can be dealt with right now. But I think we've heard enough from Mr. Seffi as an oral report to get an understanding of what there is, and also based on the report that was used last meeting as the basis for the motion to approve or not approve the development permit. So about a three-step process. First of all, we need a motion if council will allow the procedure bylaw to be waived on bringing the notice or bringing the reconsideration forward. Then it would be, if that's successful, then you could move a reconsideration of the development permit, and then the development permit's back on the table, and then you can do anything with it. You can refer, if it, depending on what council wants to do. So I'll leave. Sure, Councillor Richter.
Okay, we got a letter from LEPS this week, on November 24th, that says to Mayor and Council, we wish to alert you to information regarding the Class B creek that has been omitted from development permit number 100890. And then it goes down to say, we are concerned that the omission of this information could have adverse impacts to West Creek. This channelized creek is actually one of the main branches of West Creek, draining upstream agricultural lands as well as the highway. The creek is Class B or yellow coated.
So that's
Like, we've got experts here saying it's a creek. It's in a pipe, but it's still a creek.
fair enough. But
So this is important because
That's right.
David's right. If we don't act on this now, then, and they change the pipes around, we've altered the flow of the creek.
no one's disputing that. I'm just laying out the process that Councillor Davis needs to follow if he wishes to get this motion on the table, and that's all it is. Thank you very much. So I didn't hear a question from you. All I heard was
Okay,
you
the
made a
point of
statement.
order is this the best way to deal with it?
It's the only way I know of.
did discuss with Mr. Backen back a few weeks ago about what's something called a supplemental. Can we add a supplemental in there?
At the time of passage of the zoning bylaw or the actual development permit itself, they can be added. Once they've actually been passed, it's more complicated. Then we have to actually bring them back on the floor. So the options here, I guess, would be reconsideration, make this a notice of motion, or get a staff report, staff memo fairly quickly, with the idea that if it need be, another memo or another meeting could actually be called. The challenge that Mr. Seffi is pointing out is all that information is interesting, but to our knowledge, and I think it's extensive knowledge, that the water course is not an open water course. It is actually a closed pipe, which doesn't carry the designation that is of concern. Now, Mr. Seffi, are you aware of this communication, and do you have any comment on the communication that was being referenced? Because that might help illuminate the issue.
Yes, thank you. I am aware of the communication. I am puzzled as to what led to the information that was contained in the letter, and I've asked staff to communicate back with LEPs and inform them of the information that we have available, and perhaps with a view to having a discussion as to ideally they would contact staff and have a discussion before they communicate information to council that we believe to not be 100% accurate. So I believe the information is not totally accurate, and hopefully we can get them to understand the basis. And it may be because of what Mr. Backen was stating earlier, Your Worship, the fact that some mapping refer to historic designations of water courses that may no longer be there, or may be designating or showing a designation that applies to a long stretch of a water course, despite the fact that certain sections of it may no longer be there and may have been replaced with a pipe. So we'll have to get to the bottom of that with Langley Environmental Partner Society, and I would also go as far as saying that they're not necessarily experts, they are volunteers. They have several years of experience, but I wouldn't call them experts in the field in that they don't have the qualified environmental professional designations that some of our staff have, as well as are required by consultants hired by landowners to have in order to have the opinion relied upon.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, Councillor Davis, if you wish this to be dealt with, there's a process that needs to be followed. Number one, if you wish to have this development permit reconsidered, then a motion needs to come before council on whether or not council will waive the procedural bylaw. And if you want to refer it to staff and then for a memo, and then somebody would have to call an emergency meeting or a quick meeting, then there's an option also. And what's the other option? To do nothing, I guess. Or a notice of motion.
Okay, if I refer it and it dies right here, well, I can't go any further.
No, if you refer it, it goes to staff. Or
No, I'm sorry. If I reconsider, sorry, I said the wrong thing.
Then we can deal with it right now. And I think, but it's only my opinion. I'd rather, council can make this decision as a body.
I know, but I'm already getting feedback from staff that we shouldn't pay attention to what LEPS is saying. Their job is to map
Let's
creeks
decide what we're going to do.
environmental.
Let's move on. So we need a course of action. So you've raised an issue that is important to you, and so I've tried to outline, and Mr. Backen's tried to outline the options that are available to you under a procedural bylaw and under the way we
There's
conduct
reconsideration to refer to staff, and what was the third one?
Well,
notice
of motion. Yeah. So, Councillor Davis has.
Don't bully me, Fox.
Come on.
Okay,
Councillor Fox. Yeah. So can we need to have some direction.
I think we need to. Can I refer it to staff then?
You can make a motion to refer it to staff.
Can I make a motion to refer it to staff?
Sure, you can do that, and Councillor Long seconds that.
They said they could get a report by the end of the week.
So the motion's on the floor to refer to staff. Councillor Fox?
I won't support a motion. I hope that this doesn't happen, but I can see where BD can come back and sue us for this and sue LEPS for inappropriate information. We gave them a DP. Let's move ahead here. This is a water pipe. Go right across the street and see the same thing. Exactly the same thing within 100 meters of the front door of this building. Exactly the same thing where they...
Look at the pipe. Look at the problems it's had.
Thank you. So Councillor Fox has made his point. He doesn't support the referral. Councillor Arneson on the referral.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to add an amendment then to the referral if it's adopted. I would like to hear from somebody from the DFO, because I find it very troubling that, in fact, a group that I have never heard from, except, from an educational point of view, if LEPS is now opining and based on their information that they had as the original map makers in the township of Langley, I don't know that we should really consider maligning their abilities and just relegating them to some volunteer role. If we've relied on them all this time, I don't know how now suddenly we can say, oh, well, we don't think that they're correct. I think the new information that I find very compelling is that they are trying to direct our attention to a channelized creek is actually one of the main branches of West Creek. Now, if that is the case, I think that when we made our original decision, we may not have understood necessarily the implications and what that would mean from a policy perspective if that was the case. And so I do think it's important that we get some clarification. I understand that experts disagree from time to time, but I think that honestly speaking, if I'm to choose between being sued by BD or the DFO potentially, I don't know which poison I'd rather have. But I think that we, through council, have to do some due diligence. If we are given new information, then we have to make sure that we are following up on that information. Because once that creek, once the roadway is paved and once the building is up, that is not the time to talk about whether or not we had the adequate information that we needed. So I'm going to support it going to staff, but I would like some supplemental information. I would like LEPS to be included in the conversation and the DFO.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the referral? Okay, I'm going to call the question. Did I call this N3? And the referral carries. Councillor Fox, Mayor Froese, Councillor Qualley, Councillor Sparrow opposed. So is there any other business? I've got a whole list here. I don't know if you all want to talk about this thing or if this is all other business. No? Councillor Fox, you have other business? No. Okay, motion to terminate.
Termination.
Councillor Davis, second by Councillor Long. All those in favour? Opposed? Carried. Meeting's terminated. Thank you.